Recording. I'm also going to take the effort of muting everybody. So we'll let Lynn and Molly unmute themselves. Welcome to the April 2022 FMDiSC meeting. Going to be a really great meeting today, guys. We've got some really smart luminaries to hear from. So we're going to start with our very own board member, Lynn Allen. She's going to be interviewing, sitting down, kind of a little chat session with Molly Connolly of Thorsen Consulting. We'll do a break in the middle there, little breakout rooms and groups of 7 to 10 people where you can just kind of chit chat and get a little more intimate with people here. And then we're going to come back with kind of a partner panel of about 5 dignitaries, and I use that term loosely, that we're going to just kind of talk about, the FileMaker platform, how we got here, where we're at, where we're going. I think it's going to be really good. So I'm going to step out. I'm going to turn the mic over to Lynn Allen and hope you enjoy yourself.
Well, welcome everyone, and thanks especially to Molly for being willing to undergo this. I have to admit, interviewing is not in my skill set. So
it will be today.
After today,
Yeah.
It'll be there. Okay, so Molly and I kind of talked beforehand, so we kind of have a rough map of where we might go, but I wanted to start with Molly. Tell us about who you are right now, where you've come from.
Okay, great. All right, good. And thanks, Lynn. And I do know you. It's one of those funny things where it's like, of course I've seen you every year at DevCon. So yeah. It's great to see your face. Yeah, sure. And it's so fun to be here. I'm really glad to be invited. I have really been missing everyone. It's been very isolating and not having our anchor of DevCon every year. So this is really nice. But yeah, my name is Molly Connolly. I live just outside of Chicago. And I'll do my little story, and I know so many of you and have learned so much from a lot of you. So it's kind of fun to just kind of reconnect there. But I got out of college and I worked for Ernest Young in Washington, D.C. And so for any of you who started out with those consulting firms, there were a lot of hours and a lot of work involved. And I had used FileMaker in my college work study job to create mass mailing letters for recruiting college athletes. So I started using FileMaker to keep track of the massive amount of projects I was tracking at Ernst & Young. And I always say this because it helps me remember how happy I am with my career choice. But I was working 60, 70 hours a week, and I was 25 and I got mono, which is supposed to be a kid's disease or whatever. And I almost had an ulcer, and I was like, what am I doing? I can't keep working like this. And the bigger thing for me was I was up at the office at midnight, and my boss, the partner, was with me, and we're like photocopying for this response to a request for proposal. And it's midnight, and I'm like, wow, that's so cool that he's here with me working, And then I thought, wait a second, that guy's 40 years old and he's still here at midnight photocopying with me. What am I doing? Like, what kind of path am I looking for? So anyway, shortly after that, I was like, I got to just quit. I got to do something else. Maybe I can do something with this FileMaker thing because I really like it. And so I ended up moving to Chicago. I'm originally from Minnesota, and I wanted to get back to the Midwest, and I had some friends there. And I was looking for a job. I thought maybe I'll find a job doing FileMaker. But while I was looking for a job, I was temping. And Lynn, you and I talked about this, like, what's it like starting up your business? I had no intention of starting my own business, but what would happen is I'd be temping, and then I saw, and again, this 25 years ago, and it really is 25 years ago, which I was kind of excited to realize how long it's been. You see them using typing triplicate purchase orders, or keeping track of crazy, in those days, it was just crazy contact lists. So I'd say, hey, instead of having me answer the phones, which I'm really bad at, and I keep hanging up on people, I could make you a database, right? And so what happened is one of those places that I was temping was like, hey, we've got a lot of work for you, but you have to incorporate. So I incorporated. My company's Thorsen Consulting, which is my maiden name, very creative because I had to do it right away. And then I've been busy ever since. And so that's been one of the kind of exciting things for me about FileMaker is that, not only can I go into a lot of different industries and add value, but it's just been one of those things where certainly, for all of us who work for yourselves, there's ups and downs, but the work has typically always come. And for the most part, what happened for me is I was working at an ad agency, which has a lot of turnover. And so then somebody would leave that ad agency and say, hey, I used a really cool system at this other agency. And so I've never had, an out of the box product, but a lot of times I'm reusing the same type of solution. And so I've kind of found myself there again. So that's kind of a long story of just how I got started, which I think is similar to, I know so many of you kind of fell into it in the same way. The other thing I was reflecting with you, Lynn, I was trying to remember how I even found out about the first DevCon. And I distinctly remember a mailer I got. And again, I don't, maybe when I bought FileMaker or whatever, but it was a big postcard and I was like, maybe I should go to this thing. Maybe somebody can teach me how to do, whatever thing it was at the time. And that was Monterey for me, where I met so many of you and just, really kind of learned a ton. So after that, so I've been on my own, and then I joined up with Chris Moyer for a while, and then I worked for Soliant for a while. And then I really said, hey, I really like being on my own. It gave me a little more flexibility, especially I had small kids. And so I've been doing, on my own again since 2003, I guess. That's
Wow.
my snippet.
I was going to ask, okay, never mind. Let's move on.
And I don't mind too, Lynn, if people jump. I know Dave has to mute everybody, so we're not too loud, but
people can unmute themselves. Yeah,
okay.
The hint is if you're muted and you just hold down your space bar, it will temporarily unmute you.
Okay.
So
I just have a quick question, Molly. Which was worse, working at Ernst & Young or working for Chris Moyer?
Ernst & Young for sure. My only problem with Moyer is he'd be like, we'd take on a new project and you'd say, well, how hard can it be? And we would find out how hard it was. But also the opportunity there to say, hey, we can solve any problem. Like, I think that was an early lesson that it was like, yeah, people think it's impossible. We'll figure it out.
were you on Tech Talk, the mailing list back in the day?
I do remember some Tech Talk.
Because that's where I met most of these suspects.
Okay, nice.
So,
yeah.
And then of course at DevCon, got to put faces with names.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard when you're isolated and you're just starting out and you don't know much of anything. What were you kind of touched on it in the chat beforehand about getting where you got your resources for learning FileMaker at the beginning of your career.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for me it was interesting. So the very first one was the FileMaker 3 book that Moyer wrote. And then I went to DevCon and got scriptology. And then really, I have been so fortunate, and I think so many of us have, that, this community we have is so willing to share. So I really took advantage of just like, picking up the phone. Hey, how do you do this? How do you do this? And DevCon was really, has always been pivotal for me. And I'm curious about, especially with the last couple of years of virtual, and I think it's going to be virtual again this year, like if that'll come back, because I feel like it's a missed opportunity as we're trying to bring newer people in, like how else do you really learn in such an engaging and supportive way?
So you've worked obviously in teams and on your own. What are the good points of each?
Yeah, good question. Well, like I said, you've been doing this for 25 years now, and it's funny, you continue to learn things about yourself, which I keep hoping I'm going to have it figured out, but that's not really the case. So I go back and forth. Like I've always struggled to play a management role, right? Figuring out how to provide information in the best way. So that has been a struggle for me. I had a pretty big team at Soliant of like 12 people. And I found it really stressful, right? Just being able to communicate in different ways. And, one of the things, Lynn, you and I kind of brought up is like, there's different development styles, right? And in general, if I break it into two types of things, like there's a project, right, where you're scoping it out and you know where you're going and you have kind of a defined timeline and milestones. That's one type of work. And then the work that I'm actually much more comfortable with is what we would call it, a service contract, right, where it's just ongoing. There's a lot of live development, and that I'm much more comfortable with. But when you have a team, you have both kinds of projects and you have both kinds of people to work with, right? So I've really struggled trying to adapt to other people's style, right? So, right now I'm in the middle of a really heated, ongoing, project where everything changes, right? So you do your best and then they come back and you iterate and you iterate and you iterate. I'm comfortable with that. A couple folks on my team, it's just totally disorienting. Molly, last week you told me this and now you're changing your mind. Like, well, the client changed their mind. Right. So we're getting paid. So I'm okay with it. But I understand that ambiguity is hard for a lot of people to deal with. And also finding that balance between, okay, I should go down this road or I should wait. So again, that I find for me, I'm comfortable with that with my own choices, but when I'm trying to delegate and I'm trying to make sure that the team knows what expected and I'm dealing with different styles there, that has been very challenging. So that's one of the reasons why I mostly use subcontractors, right? I've had some employees and continue to have challenges there, figuring out the right balance and figuring out how to find a fit for who you're working with.
Early on, I had to learn not to fall in love with what I'd built, because then you become personally involved when the client says, no, I didn't mean that, I meant this, and you have to unbuild everything and do it another way. It can be emotionally wrenching if you're not detached from the work itself,
Well, I think that's a really interesting point for a couple of reasons. One is also when they're wrong. Like it's the client is in charge and you're like, but this is why you need to do it this way.
Right.
And what you're doing is going to create some, you can foresee it in ways they can't. So that one's tough. It's like finding that balance between advising and adjusting to what they want, right? There's a bunch of times where you're like, that's a terrible idea. Am I going to do it? Right? But the other one I think too is like, I do that as well when I'm building things myself. And I don't think, a lot of the folks I work with are I want to say much more organized or much more orderly in how they do their development. And so I'm fine with different people having different styles. But I do get caught up in, well, it's only going to take me this long, so I'll do it myself. It'll take me too long to explain it, so let me just do it myself. And that puts you in a rut because you can't necessarily expand and figure out how to get to that role where you're delegating. And that's been a challenge for me.
Are you going to be a manager or a mother?
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, I never thought of it that way. Am I packing my son's? Am I going to keep packing my son's lunch, or am I going to let him figure it out?
When you're a mom, there's a lot of, I'll just do it myself. It'll be easier.
Yeah. And when do you let go of that? It's funny.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, there's been a puppy arrival. He's got to go. Yeah, come on. John wants to show the Hi.
Oh.
There she is. Hi, buddy. Oh, this is Clover. Chris and Ernest and Dave and Alan. See Alan right on there? We got the whole crew here. Yeah, out. The puppy just learned how to ring the bell to tell us to go out. That is fascinating. I had no idea they could do that.
Yeah, anyway. Middle of the night. Tingle, tingle, tingle.
Yeah. And Lynn, are you doing your own sole proprietorship? So you're doing all your own work? Are you working with the team?
Right. Well, my team was my husband, who's now retired, to do his writing. But
that must be hard. You're like, come on, honey, help me. And he's like, no, I'm retired.
He's much happier. Life is much better around the house. Yeah. But for many, many years, he supported one of our major clients and built a huge system for them.
Mhm.
So yeah, we would tend to have very long-term clients. And so we're very deeply invested in those companies.
Mhm.
In fact, I have one client or had one client where the business had been sold 4 times.
Oh, wow. And so then you just
I
keep
was on my
recreating?
4th owner before they moved away from FileMaker. So yeah, sometimes it's really nice to have those long-term relationships where you understand the client really well. Sometimes you understand their business better than they do.
Mhm.
Um, so that's kind of cool. So how much project management are you getting to do nowadays?
Most of the bulk of my work is kind of the account management, the project management, and I do have so the big project I'm working on right now is for Chicago Public Schools, and it's really all consuming right now. And the interesting thing about it is it's a significant amount of integration. So that's another challenge I have right now is that I'm at the center of this thing where I understand what's going on with I don't know how to program DynamoDB in Vue. I don't know how to program SQL. I don't know how to program Aspen or Python or IPSKI, but I'm the one who knows how all these pieces come together. And so that's been kind of exciting to say, okay, now I am learning these new technology. I'm doing a lot of syncing between all these with working a lot with Jesse at 360 Works. And so I like being in that middle role and being able to see kind of the whole picture and how it comes together. But again, it runs into that piece of delegating. Like if I'm the only one who knows how this piece is going to affect that piece, it feels like it's certainly not sustainable, right? So I'm trying to step out of again with the FileMaker piece I developed. So it's hard to be like, well, I could just do it, but really I need to be looking at things at a higher level. Um, and just another point to bring up there that I'm curious if other people chime in is, we talked about learning FileMaker back in the day, and FileMaker 6, you could know that product inside and out, right? You knew everything it was capable of. And in a lot of ways, it was just really satisfying to be like, okay, I know how to do all of this. And now there's so many different FileMaker itself has grown, but then all the integration ability that we have, I find that exciting, but also challenging. Like, how do you get to the point where you're comfortable with knowing a piece of it, right? And relying on somebody else that they're going to know more than you, and you're going to trust that they're going to implement it in the best way, as opposed to being able to kind of do it all yourself. I find that, again, it's exciting because you can do so much more than you could before, but it's also challenging to let go of that and kind of trust that the pieces are going to come together.
Right. You're not actively seeking new clients at this point, are you, being so busy?
I'm not, you know, and it's funny because, you kind of go, I'm curious too what other people's experience with COVID was, but I have like a dozen clients, and the biggest one by far is Chicago Public Schools and then University of Chicago. But I have a dozen clients, and when COVID hit, they all hit the brakes, right? No, nobody knew what was happening. They didn't have money. They didn't know how to make decisions. Just every project I had stopped cold. And I remember thinking, okay, you know what? No one knows what's going on. Nobody's going to make any decisions. I'm not going to do any marketing now. I'm not going to do any sales. I'm just going to, because it's just going to be a waste of time. And
Mhm.
so that was, you know, so that was what, June and then the following June, I was like, because I was thinking, oh, I'm pretty smart here. I'm enjoying myself. I'm doing some other things. I'm not stressing myself. I got enough work, but I'm not stressing myself out. And then the next June came, and I was like, I might be the world's biggest idiot. Like I haven't put any effort in, and now there's no pipeline whatsoever. But luckily for me, all of this came back, and most of the people I'm talking to, the work is coming back, and oftentimes bigger than before. So it was somewhere between being an idiot and being a genius. I landed on that. But it was nice it is funny to figure out that balance too when you have your own business. Like how much 10 years ago, the phone just rang, right? My number one was always like, nope. I was just referring things left and right because I didn't have enough resources to do all the work. That stopped. Part of that is because I'm not out there as much, but I think we're not getting the kind of leads we did with people just calling because they use FileMaker. And so that had been a challenge, but it sounds like you've got a couple of kind of steady clients, and that's very similar for me as well, that I've got core clients, and my key is like, how do I keep up with them? And, another challenge you continue to work with is the whole squeaky wheel gets the grease, because I've got some clients that are great clients that I need to pay more attention to. I could be helping move them forward in ways that I'm not necessarily doing just because they're not complaining. They're satisfied with what they have. And it's like, how do you circle back and keep things moving forward and keeping them up to date? Well, when they're not complaining like other clients are.
When I was at this stage in my business where it was really expanding and I was starting to become overwhelmed, I discovered that if I raised my prices, I could
Yes.
probably filter out some of the less desirable clients pretty easily.
Yeah.
So that's one strategy I followed, was
I agree with
until
that.
you have enough work, but not too much.
Mm-hmm. And figure out what, and it is surprising. You're like, oh, am I going to be able to let go of this? But yeah, we had talked a little bit about like, hey, how long did it take to get your business up and running? Well, when you're 25 and you eat ramen noodles, it's no big deal, right? And then you have a family. When you have a certain income that you need to reach, you got a house, you don't, sleep on your friend's floor. Like there's a whole different set of expectations for the business.
Right. Yeah. Luckily, I was married to an aeronautical engineer, and he
You had that covered.
Yeah, he bankrolled me until I got so big, and he was looking to leave the industry, and so he became which was kind of prescient because he wasn't working with me when I named the company Allen and Allen.
Oh,
He came
really?
in later.
That's great.
Yeah. So.
I also really like your vocabulary, Lynn.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, a couple of emails. I'm like, I had to Google one of them. And you just whipped out a prescient. That's nice. Are you a writer too? Because you're.
No, I read a lot.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. Okay, talking about project. Let's go on to a lot of us older folks are worried about bringing in new people. I know that we want to encourage young developers, and we keep making suggestions to FileMaker, give it away free to college students or do various other things to expose FileMaker to the greater community out there.
Yeah.
And I know that Women Innovating Together grew out of Women of FileMaker. Do you see that as an outreach, or?
Well, I certainly hope so. And I do, I've done training programs over the years. I had like a virtual training program, and you'd try to encourage more people into the FileMaker space. And I think we are facing some pretty big barriers. One, in terms of, there isn't the outreach we would like, right, to just introduce people, and we continue to push that. But even, in some of the shops I work with, they're finding they do hire these young folks, they get them up and running in FileMaker, and it's just not that exciting for them, right? They're not taking the FileMaker in the same way we are. Is it because it's not cloud? Is it because it's the deployment problems, right? It is frustrating. Like now that I've got some product implementation, the steps you need to take to roll out a new revision are oppressive, right? And so I think there's some technical issues that we have to handle. And one way I try to think of it is, as I'm working in this particular environment where I really am using FileMaker for exactly what it's needed for, right? So for Chicago Public Schools, they've got 40,000 kids. They've got 8 different student information systems that track different information. And we need a way to like pull out information for different requests that change all the time. Right. So FileMaker is a really nice way that we can adjust more quickly, that they're not going to do in SQL. They're not going to do in kind of these legacy systems, but I can quickly pull it out. And so I'm wondering if, and the other thing that's really exciting about the project is just how much we can extend the capabilities of FileMaker. One limitation was, so it's a selection module, right? There's a bunch of schools in Chicago where it's a lottery system, people are applying. And so once a year, they find out the results, and we have 5,000 concurrent users, right? They all hit the website when it goes live at 3 p.m. on Friday because they want to find out the results of where their kid's going to school. And, that would have been unthinkable in FileMaker, right? How do you even handle like the licensing problems? How's that even conceivable? And what we did, and this is Jesse Barnum with 360 Works and Sam Barnum out there in California, we basically did an integration where FileMaker is controlling all the results because there's a ton of algorithms running on there to figure out who gets what. But then the results are displayed. We're using mirror sync to DynamoDB, and Dynamo has no problem, scaling to 5,000 users and then back down to 12. So I wonder if we're trying to get younger people, if we do look at more of those integration roles that can give them, more access to some of the technologies that they're going to find easier to use or more exciting to use, right? I think FileMaker is exciting, but it's hard to pitch to some of these kids who can blow out beautiful web interfaces where we're using like Vue and Vuetify and all these different tools that they use that are more interesting. And so how do we continue to capture their attention but leverage the strengths of FileMaker? That was like a super long not answer. Sorry.
Great. It's great. You want to talk a little, where do you see women innovating together going in the future? I know it's not just women, there are plenty of men involved.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I love too that you were the original Breakfast Club, right? And then I spent quite a bit of time getting it going, getting that luncheon going. And we had a bunch of people contribute to the scholarship program. And then it really, kind of turned into, well, it's a nonprofit now. And I love what the leadership there is doing. The main thing I love about it is just, I do think everyone needs opportunities for leadership. And so now that it's an official organization and there's a treasurer and there's there's different roles that people play, I think that gives a really good way to take on a little more responsibility and help build up, kind of that confidence that people need. So I think just as an entity itself, it's great for our community to be able to afford those opportunities and have some kind of avenue for people to grow. And then the kind of things that these women are coming up with, right? The mentorship program, and then there's been a bunch of, just a bunch of other programs they're coming up with. I'm not sure what the best place to be is. Maybe they can do more training materials. But I do have, and again, I'm not very involved in it now. I just love that there's new people coming up with new ideas, and that's part of, another part of my growth is like, for the longest time I was involved in like everything FileMaker, right? Every single organization, and I wanted to be in charge of it, right? And I was like, you know what? It's time to step back, right? Like we need to bring up other people to speak. We need to bring up other people to take over our organizations. We need to get their fresh ideas. And so a little bit of the handing of the baton, I think is important but it's, I had to be like, oh, well, you could just ride the bus, you don't have to, you don't have to drive everything.
It's hard when you've had your hands on everything to step back and let somebody else mess with it,
Yeah.
And I say that, with solutions I've made, and just, of course, my husband lets me manage entirely the admin side of the business.
He lets you, he just doesn't want to do the invoicing. He doesn't want to do it.
No, that's not his role in things. So,
yeah. Well, and there's certainly part of it is like, kind of trying to set the ego aside, right? I love getting up on the stage at DevCon, right? You have to go, what is up with that, Molly? Just go do your work. You can just,
we all have different parts of our personalities that need to be satisfied.
Yeah.
And it's cool not to do just the same thing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a lot of time to look at your Banyan solution that you were kind of talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Okay. Well, no, this is great. It's one of those where I wish I could get everybody's advice from this. So this particular project I'm doing for Chicago Public Schools, I have a real area of subject matter expertise in these school selection processes. And so with, well, we'll see what happens now as the political agenda keeps changing. But there are lots and lots of school districts that that are looking to offer universal pre-K, especially big cities. That's part of the agenda for big cities. It's a big initiative in Illinois, and New York is doing it as well. And for universal pre-K, one of the examples is the goal is to give seats to the neediest children, right? So how do you assess that with a low income, or if there's different backgrounds that need to be addressed? So one of the things that I did, and this was interesting too over COVID, because again, my work really slowed down, and it gave me some time that I don't usually have to think about what would I like to do? What could I do instead of just scrambling to keep up with all these clients? And then I did get the PPP loan, which was helpful to say, I can take this time and invest in developing a product. And so what happened is I basically developed a product that there's a core piece in FileMaker, and I'm calling it Banyan because I have found one of my biggest hurdles, and I know you guys have all experienced this in different contexts, is IT doesn't want to hear anything about FileMaker, right? And so that's been a struggle at a couple of organizations I'm at, where it's like, you got to make it so that they don't know it's FileMaker, right? So, and over the years, I still have clients that they're like, oh, the FileMaker's not working. So I've worked with all new clients to call it something instead of the FileMaker, which then IT just wants to kill. So, anyway, so Banyan is a piece of it is in FileMaker, and then there's a piece in Dynamo, and then there's also a piece in SQL. But FileMaker is the part that allows me to develop the functionality really quickly. And so one of my challenges, and this was years ago, Alan and I worked on a couple different conferences where we put together product conferences and learned a lot about people in the industry who have FileMaker products. And again, I've never had an actual product that I'm reselling, but I have had systems where I built a job tracking system for one agency and then sold it to another one and sold it to another one. They're all different customized. So right now I have a base product for this pre-K selections. And what happened, I'm going to go ahead and build this. Maybe, maybe it'll work out that the other vendor that was chosen to build this for Chicago Public Schools, who has failed many times before, maybe they'll just fail again and I'll be ready. I might as well do it. And this is one of those situations I think a lot of you have seen as well, where it's there's a really involved FileMaker system and some other vendor comes in and is like, oh, I can do that. And they can't, right? They can't replicate the depth of customization we have, certainly not in the timeframes they're given. So this particular vendor that always wins because they know somebody who knows somebody in Chicago, and that's how it works, they failed. And so now Banyan is being used in Chicago Public Schools. And my hope, and that's why I'm so busy right now, my hope is get that up and running and then have that as another test case that I can shop around, and particularly to larger school districts, because those are the ones that have kind of these really intense rules and that need to be implemented.
Yeah, government and educational clients and their rules they're wedded together, but the problem is that every time a new, managing committee comes in, they have to change everything the last one did just to justify their own existence. And so you get these things where they're doing a longitudinal study, but this third year, we're going to change all the criteria. It's kind of stuff where this year, this is in, next year, that's in, and we have to do a changeover and try to keep our data clean.
This is exactly it. And they get different vendors for different reasons because they have different allocations, or I can only, my system, I had this much of a budget. So of course I couldn't do the whole thing. I have trouble balancing the political decision-making versus the technical implementation. Unrealistic timelines because they've been sitting on their decisions for 6 weeks, but they still need to go live in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Do
you think that's similar, different from profit-making customers who really need to look at the bottom line? I mean,
Yeah, and it's interesting though, because I think there's a balance there. I think one of my frustrations with some of the, for-profit companies I work with is, the goal is once you've developed trust, they're not nitpicking your invoices, right? But that takes a while. And so the one thing that is nice about a government contract is you can come in and say, hey, here's what I'm going to deliver to you, and here's the milestones that I'm going to deliver, and here's what we're going to bill for it. And there doesn't seem to be, at least in my experience, as much fussing about like, well, did you bill me for that half hour where 2 of your project managers were on it? Like, it's what's the end result, right? And sometimes, and I've had an easier time with government in establishing kind of those deliverables and being able to say, hey, look, we accomplished it. And yes, I do have timesheets if you need it, but I don't have to like justify every single step along the way. With a lot of my for-profit, I've had a bigger challenge, not bigger challenge like, again, they're saying, oh, I really got to watch my bottom line. And yet they're wasting hours looking at, how much time we spent on a particular task versus what's the outcome and how and what's the impact of what I've delivered. So it's interesting. I think you can have challenges on both sides, and it kind of depends on your decision maker, and it depends on your sales process, right? I've done a lot with, for the longest time it was just hourly, right? And that was just fine. I would hourly billing, and then it was like, well, I've got to get to the point where I'm selling the value of what I'm doing, and again, maybe it's project based, but those continue to be challenges, and I kind of have to address them on a case-by-case basis. But there's also an amazing amount of waste with the government stuff, which is frustrating.
yeah, you were talking about trust. It's hard when you come in after another vendor who has failed.
Oof.
And you have to gain the trust that they violated.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult at times.
Well, the other thing I've gotten better at is I typically have taken on a lot of projects that are, the developer took off on a boat or whatever, they just disappeared. and part of it is like, oh, well, Chris Moyer, if you're still there, how hard can it be? Right. We can figure it out and end up supporting some really terrible systems. Right. And so I'm slowly saying no to those, right? Part of me is like, yeah, but we can figure it out. And we can't leave them hanging on this system. But on the other hand, that can be a trap. And I've had a couple situations where I'm supporting really complicated systems. Here's another example. Why, if you're a young person, do you really want to come into that? I'm looking at Colleen because she's seen some of the disasters I've taken over is, do you really want to be involved in something that isn't developed the way it should be? Right? So many of these solutions, we would all do them differently. I can look at every single one of my solutions and be like, man, if I could start over, I would do it differently. So that's another thing that I've been doing lately, especially with these other big projects looming, to say, I'm not going to take on any more of the pickup work.
Yeah, I think you're the part of your career. I did that too. At one point, my husband and I sat down and said, large customers aren't any more trouble than small customers. Really, when you talk about the time spent on the phone, hassling with decision makers, talking to knowledge workers, whatever, a big customer doesn't suck up that much more of your time. But the small customer, you bill a lot less. I had one for a while. They would never pay until it was time to call me again.
Right.
So I put a check in the mail and I'd go, oh, they got another problem. So I started trimming my client list, not just with the raising prices, but actually telling clients that I couldn't develop their crappy Band-Aid, built by the warehouse guy solution anymore if they would not rebuild it. And I think you're kind of to that point where you're trimming your annoyances away.
No, I think that's really, hey, happy to rebuild it, but otherwise let me find you somebody who can take care of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I also have a problem, like there's a couple of customers I have where there's power users in the system. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, you can't take that back from someone, even though they really should not have full access anymore. So It's another challenge I'm facing where it's, someone who's used to having full access, but now you've got a lot more contingencies because the system has expanded so much and they can really screw things up.
Do you have that in your contracts that if somebody else messes it up, they pay you for fixing it?
No, that's a great idea. Like, or just
yeah.
start out and be like, listen, here's who can have what access.
Right. I always made it so that once they paid in full, they get the master access if they want it.
Yeah.
But there was something in the contract that said if somebody goes in there, another developer or one of your staff goes in there and messes things up, you're going to pay me to fix it. And
Boy, I could have used that on a lot of occasions.
Yeah. If I mess up when I deploy things, then you got 30 days to find it and tell me, and I'll fix it for free. But somebody else messes it up. No, I put that in my contract quite early on. Okay.
So we can always learn new lessons. Again, I could have used one a long time ago.
So Banyan is in deployment with Chicago schools, or
yeah. So I'm using it and customizing it, and so that's again my next trick. It's like, now I'm customizing this so heavily for Chicago Public Schools, nobody else could possibly use it. So how do I get back to a core product? And I'm really at the beginning of it, and I've been playing around with the idea of, do I do an initial because there's a lot of small school districts that just need a basic application process, right? And so, I mean, look at how many Google Sheets we see out there, right? So should I do just a little freemium product where you can, hey, here's how your school district could use this to collect applications for your pre-K program, and let that be an entryway into, and if you need additional assistance with the selection module, we can. So I'm kind of playing around with all those ideas, talking to other people who are doing products and figuring out what's the best model. But I also have to keep in mind, like, what does that model look like? If I had 2 Chicago public schools, it certainly would require a lot of hiring. Well, that's not been a strong suit for me. So where am I trying to go? Where am I going to go next?
You want to go there. Yeah. How do you balance that when you're doing a product like this? Obviously, I have experience with this. How do you balance potential profit versus the hours you spend? How do you know when too much is enough?
It's a great question. Well, and it's funny because like I said, I had not had the opportunity to do that until I had that little chunk of time and PPP money, like some room to give yourself. And that's one thing that I want to do moving forward, to say, hey, I'm going to dedicate some space for this R&D, right? Like how do I continue to dedicate to develop this product if that's the direction I'm going to go? Instead of, like, it'd be very easy for me to just drop the idea entirely and just keep customizing it for Chicago and hope I get the contract with Chicago again next year. That's typically been, what I've done over these years. It's always enough work, right? But I do want to look at, I turned 50 this year, right? I don't want to work till I'm 90. So, so maybe, again, the work we do is rewarding. So it's easy to think, I can keep doing this, where I do make a good living, but I'm not packing away, I'm not packing it away. How could I get it to the point where I'm working less and having that sustainable income? And I think the primary way to look at that is through some type of product development.
Right. Vertical markets are something you sell over and over again. There are a few like Allen and Barry, who have successful vertical market products.
Yeah.
So, but
talking to you guys again.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. What's the coolest FileMaker solution you've come across or developed yourself? The coolest thing it did?
Oh, well, I think it's so funny. Yeah, I think that I already told the one about like the 5,000 concurrent users, and it's just because it was just so exciting to be like, what, we can do this, right? And to figure out, like, that is extending the power of FileMaker. Like, there's no way we could have built the whole thing in Dynamo or SQL. Like, everything that had to happen to come to that point was in FileMaker, and to be able to leverage that other tool to make it accommodate that. It also was extra helpful because we had to go through load testing. So there was my site and then the other vendor who shall not be named site. And so they were both load testing. And it was so gratifying to see. This one was like, it died. And and the FileMaker Dynamo just went through the roof. And it was, it was extra satisfying because IT was very anti-FileMaker. And so it shouldn't have had to go through load testing because of other things, but they made us do it anyway because it was FileMaker and not on their approved list. And then we just blew the competition away. So it was fun to be able to say, look at how I can extend everything we've been doing.
You did a podcast recently where you discussed hosting providers.
Oh, what a relief. I finally can't, as I talked about trying to simplify my life, I was like, I'm not going to do hosting anymore. I've spent a lot of time. And so, so I have a couple, I don't know if in the podcast with Jeremy, it was fun to talk about. I've decided I'm not hosting any of my clients anymore. I outsource it, so it's one less thing for me to deal with. And then there's just, I don't know if and some people like it, so that's great, and it can be a source of income, but even like the licensing, I hate dealing with the licensing. And again, I don't have other people to handle that or just manage it. And so it's more paperwork that drives me crazy. So just depending on the type of client, I've used a couple different hosting sources. So we kind of got into that, like, who I'm using for what. And there's some small clients like, hey, just get it off your server, get it onto FMP Host, does a great job. It's inexpensive. They can manage the licensing. I do a lot of hosting with 360 Works, and that's primarily because we're doing, we've got 5 servers talking to different entities, and we had to have it all secured for CPS standards. And I needed access to the box. Like on that one, I need to be able to get into that server box and install things. And even though they're supporting it, I still needed direct access so I could customize it. And then the other one I use is Sliant Cloud. And that's my set it and forget it. It's a little more expensive, but they do all the updates. They handle the licensing. They scale up the volume. I barely have to watch it. And again, that gives me more room to just focus on what the client needs in terms of development and not have to work about how they're being supported. I don't know if I'm curious if other people are doing hosting too, but it was a big relief for me. And that was actually a couple of years ago. I just started doing that, saying, you know what, I got to roll these off. This is one less thing I need to deal with. And for the amount, the amount I was able to charge for my dozen clients, it's not worth it.
Well, how long did you host people or clients?
Well, it was mostly I would have, all of them had their own internal server that I would VPN into, and the IT guy was supposed to take care of it, but they didn't realize you can't have something else running on that server. So yeah, I didn't do any hosting myself, but the client would host it, and then I was responsible for supporting it.
Oh yeah. Smaller places. I mean, with the big clients, especially government and education, they have their own IT departments, and you just have to deal with them.
You just say, yeah, right. But please don't restart the server without telling me every Thursday night. 4 a.m.
Read the 75 emails I sent you about the process before you reboot the server.
Yes. So it's really nice to, not all of mine, some of my clients, Blue Cross Blue Shield still insists on having their own, and that's too bad.
Yeah, a lot depends on internal security requirements, I think.
I think so too.
Can they physically control the location of their data? It's a big deal for some people.
Yeah.
So, let's see. What's
your
greatest frustration right now with FileMaker? The thing that you spend the most time wishing it were different?
Oh gosh. I think this is one thing where I have done a good job with things that frustrate me in FileMaker. I find a different way to, I used to like, really dig in and try and do the tips and tricks and figure out how to make FileMaker do something it probably shouldn't do. And that was like really fun, like part of the fun of DevCon, of going and showing someone like, here, I got it to do this. And now I've kind of switched gears and be like, what's the best tool for the job? Right. So though, I think that this is going to sound so silly, but the one frustration I have right now is just the server admin console. I have this, I have one solution where there's literally like 50 server-side scripts and you can't alphabetize it. And when you make another script, it shows up wherever the heck it feels like going. And so there's just a little bit of that interface that I go a little crazy with.
Yeah, I told you mine was the antiquated import dialogue where you're dragging fields up and down, and
I don't love that either. I don't love that either. It is a little better. You can type it. It's not, you can type it, but there's still a lot of drag. Yeah. Now I think, there's some bigger issues I'd love for FileMaker. Just the deployment and the licensing is, all stuff we've talked about before, but most of the little annoyances I try and get around with some other tools, and that's and again, that's helpful of like tapping into people who know different technologies, and we can work together, and they'll be like, that's not even an issue in whatever. Like I wouldn't even have thought that was a problem. And then on the flip side, I'll ask them to do something in Dynamo, and they'll be like, what? That's impossible. And you're like, yeah, just do this in FileMaker and we're done. So they were hitting the time.
But no, we've got plenty of time, but I thought I'd throw it open to other people who want to ask questions.
Yeah, come on, turn your cameras back on so I can see some faces.
I got one from Molly. One of the things is I've known Molly forever. We know each other's kids, blah, blah, blah. One of the things that I always found fascinating about you, Molly, is how you just seem to have a bit of an entrepreneurial thing. You did your Kickstart program with the young developers. You did your product conference. You did the Moose set of conferences. You jump into Women of FileMaker. You seem to be very competent at spinning up new ideas and getting behind them and shoving them forward. And that just strikes me as dripping with entrepreneurial spirit. How do you feel about that?
I love that you say it that way, because other people say to me, they're like, what do you really do though? I mean, there's the Moose and the whatever, and like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm a FileMaker developer. So I really like, I have had so much fun. And again, I think it's because we've got this great community of like, you get some good ideas and you can put a group together. And I feel like that's my preferred way of learning, is like, through group discussion, and just trying out the training resources and trying to share the business knowledge. So those have all been really fun for me. And, right now I'm kind of like, I don't have as much energy, so maybe I'll just do my development. But I like a new challenge. I like to try new things. And it just feels like, there's so many opportunities out there. I just have to do a little better job of picking which ones I'm going to go after.
Anyone else?
I am slightly off topic. Did you say that there are 40,000 kids in the Chicago school system?
40, well, there's more than that. There's we have 40,000 applicants for these choice selection processes we go through.
Okay.
Yeah, but
there's just like 750,000 in LA. The numbers seem very small.
Yeah, you're like, that doesn't sound right. Yeah, because I want to say there's 400,000 students K through 12. And then a small percentage of them participate in actually applying for these selective enrollment projects. Are you doing work with LA schools?
Not anymore.
That sounds like some of the people in Chicago came from LA, and they're all like, yeah, we have the same problems. Right? You have a district that huge. There are just huge challenges. Like, how do you meet the needs of all those kids?
You've got a couple questions earlier in the chat, so I guess I'll just pipe in with mine, which was early on. So I was wondering, how much do you end up jumping in and doing yourself, I guess mostly dev versus managing and delegating. I think we've had that conversation before.
I know. Yeah. I was doing pretty well for a while of just like, okay, delegating the request. But, I'm back into with this particular client that's absorbing all my time for the next 2 months. I'm doing 20 hours a week of programming, and I'd like to do, none. Well, that's not true, because I do, the thing is, you think, oh, I should just be managing, but like, then you feel disconnected if you're not doing some work, right? To have some clue. And there is, again, we go back to a little bit of ego, where it's like, I don't want to be in a position where I'm fine with it. Almost everybody I work with knows more than I do, but I don't want to know nothing. I want to be able to say, but did you think about this? Right? So I'd like to have it where it's more of an advisory or a double checking or a setting the stage, and not like literally before this meeting, I was going in and updating a modification timestamp so that Mirror Sync would run and the student record would show up properly. I don't think I should be doing that, but I do.
I hear you.
So we'll keep working on it, Dina. How are you doing on that? Are you doing yet?
I had a couple subcontractors, and then, one left for a full-time job, and the other, got busy with other things. And I went in there and realized it was so great. While I thought he was doing a good job, that the work was, when I thought the work was getting done. And then when I found out all the things I had to do to, to fix things or finish things, it was like, all right, I'm just going to do it myself again. And it's like so hard to not do that. So challenge.
It really is. Well, and the thing is, when you do let go and you're like, all right, cool, somebody else is going to take care of it, and you come in and see a disaster or something that just is done so differently, it's hard to get somebody else to support it. That makes it harder to keep trying to delegate.
And you go, oh my God, my name is still on this. Yeah.
Right. I'm responsible. I got to make sure this gets done.
I mean, it is so great when they do a good job. It's just that balance, right? Because I'm sure you can't just step away. You have to manage and, have those meetings and peek in and make sure it's being done right.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. Anybody? Make it a good one.
Molly, Dave again, some of us work in offices, many or most of us work from home. How do you find, it's always so difficult to find that work-life balance. How do you manage that? Do you struggle with it? Do you have really clear goals and objectives, or how do you manage that?
This is where I'm saying, like, I keep thinking I've figured things out, and then I backslide. I was doing really well for a long time of like having set time in the office, and I would leave and I would go exercise or whatever. And then now I'm literally like, I got a puppy, so I would leave my desk. It was like, I have to make sure that my calves don't atrophy because I'm sitting at my desk for 12 hours a day. I think it's a tough balance. And like, right now, this particular project is so deadline oriented that I'm like, it's fine. I'll just, 3 months, I can just work all the time. And it's not, right? It's not. I'm like pasty and not exercised. And so I just think it's an ongoing challenge. And one of the things, it's nice to see all your faces, is one of the things that has kept me sane over the years is you talk about the project and have your colleagues be like, yeah, that could wait, Molly. It's always going to be like that, and just to get those reminders that like, yeah, you do have to set office hours, and you do have to, even though it's still going to be there tomorrow, and just revisiting that to make sure that you do have some life balance. But again, I think like so many of us, like we like what we do, right? So it's not like I don't want to be sitting there figuring out this cool thing, but I can't just sit in front of my desk the whole time. So there we go. All the challenges.
Molly, I want to thank you so much for the time you spent. Although you didn't show any slides, you did a lot of prep, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, good. Well, thanks for having me. I mean,
Love having the conversation with you.
Thank you. It's nice to see everybody. Look at all these friends. Stephen.
You'd be here every month.
Look at that. All right. This is great. And it's not just FMDiSC. The last thing is I want to know if I get a Pooh Bah hat or if that was just for Monterey.
I haven't even got one.
Maybe that should come back, Dave.
Yeah, we need another Fez. I think Bob Shockey was sort of our Fez acquisition agent, so we'll have to look into that.
That was my favorite. That was my favorite.
Great segment, guys. Super thanks to Lynn for orchestrating this, and for Molly, just a great view into your world. And thanks for sharing so much about, what's worked well for you and what you struggle with and what you hope for. It's just a great little segment. We're going to pause the recording now. Welcome everybody back. Again, first segment, fantastic, great hearing. Again, I love a good story. I love hearing from one of our own, and Molly just absolutely hit it out of the park with Lynn's help there. I want to welcome everybody back. This is, a pretty, I don't know if I want to use the word esteemed. That's always kind of used.
That is way overstating.
Completely overstated. But I want to basically just kind of do a quick welcome. I'm just going to do a slide here for a second, just to do the fun and the fantastic. But we've got a really extraordinary panel of people, all platinum partners of the FileMaker community. Bob Shockey needs no introduction to this group. He's been one of the founding members, board member for a gazillion years, platinum partner, one of my oldest friends in the FileMaker community, deep thinker, especially in the areas of design, interface, etc. Chris Moyer, like I said, a young Dave Knight. I had a lot more hair when Chris blew a lot of it off my head back in the day. He's been, again, just a stellar guy, a smart cookie, and really good at distilling down a lot of thoughts that I think we all share as FileMaker developers. We don't need to say too much about me. You guys know me and have heard my reel before. Ernest, longtime friend, had many conversations with this man, deep thinker. And again, he throws the football all the way down the field. He thinks far and wide about things I think that a lot of us are interested in. So I'm expecting some good things from him today. And Mark Richman, a man, if you've never seen Mark, when I go to a developer conference and see Mark speak, my neck gets sore because I'm just nodding my head going, yes, yes, yes. He's just a really bright guy. You should care what he says, because I don't know anybody in the FileMaker community that Claris taps on the shoulder as much as Mark to go, hey, Mark, what do you think? So we've got a pretty good assemblage here of talent. And I'm just, again, I'm proud to call these guys friends of mine, and also just really great proponents of this community. So I kind of want to just jump right in. And I'm going to throw this around. We're going to kick it a little bit. Lynn will throw some questions at us every once in a while, but I've got a bunch of topics and I want to kind of just throw them around the room. How did we get here? We're FileMaker developers. We've been doing this, many of us, for decades. The platform's been around for 20, 30 years. How did we get here culturally and technically? And I want to throw that, one of the people I think is going to have a really good insight on this because of his past and his thoughts on this. Chris Moyer, what are your thoughts, Chris?
So, yeah, I joined Claris in 1991, and back then Claris was, fighting Microsoft for desktop supremacy. They had MacWrite and MacDraw, and eventually ClarisWorks and ClarisCAD. They had a ton of products. And so I think it's important to remember that, FileMaker was originally a DOS product, but when it came to the Mac, it was put into this stable of all these other graphically oriented products. And so it picked up the sort of company livery, as it were. So you had a selection tool and a rectangle tool and a text tool and stuff like that. And so I think FileMaker is significantly different from a lot of other databases in that it has this sort of graphical origin story. It was designed to be a desktop product. And, as the paradigm changes of the environment that people run apps in has changed from desktop to web to mobile, it still has this sort of original DNA from that graphical paradigm. That's
sort of that WYSIWYG aspect, right?
Yeah,
that we got away from the command line and so forth.
And as a result of these tools, everything in FileMaker is an object. And so it's like this thing from another planet to people who are used to coding for real and, you know, writing in C# and stuff like that. They're used to typing stuff to create. And in FileMaker, everything is clickable. If you want a new script step or you want to reorder it, you click on it and drag. And so that is extremely well suited to, you know, people who sort of primarily process things visually, in particular artists. And I think it's no accident that a ton of people in the FileMaker community are either musical or do some other type of art. I know Adam is a woodworker, and so there's a lot of that in there. And so this like innately appeals to a certain subset. You know, it's almost like Linux users at the command line versus, you know, a Windows or a Mac user who like to use a graphical user interface. So there's that sort of fundamental innateness to FileMaker that I think is not in a lot of other products. And that's been almost FileMaker's exclusive domain for a long, long time until recently. And you have the likes of Airtable and these spreadsheets in the sky that have started nipping at FileMaker's heels and giving them a run for their money. But for a long, long time, they had that sandbox all to themselves.
Yeah. Bob, you were, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, you know, I think we're at an inflection point right now where, and there have been other inflection points when it moved from Mac to Windows and the rise of the web and the rise of the mobile. But now there's the rise of a lot more competitors that FileMaker has not had to contend with up until recent years. And so I think this is an interesting moment.
Yeah, Bob, you know, you a graduate of art school, you come from an artist background, still are an artist. A lot of this resonates with you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, even when I was working on a PC and build my very first database, it was with a product that I don't remember the name of, but one of the things I really liked about it was that it let me build my screen using ANSI characters and different color backgrounds in that DOS environment, you know, and you could kind of move around in it in a way that was more interactive than what you might expect from other things that were called databases up to that point. And so, you know, moving into FileMaker was just, you know, I mean, well, it was kind of an accident, but because it just kind of got thrust on me in my job. But, you know, it was a really easy thing to do, to pick up FileMaker and start working with it. And that graphical aspect of it was, I mean, I was working at the time, I was working for the LA Weekly, and we were, you know, using Macs to build, you know, in Quark Express to build ads and pages and things like that. So, you know, it just fit right in with all these visually oriented people as a way to help to organize our work.
Mark, what your path, you know, from a historical standpoint, how do you see, you know, again, the platform and your own world, how did they intersect, and where did you see FileMaker really kind of rising from, you know, obscurity into its early years of success and so forth?
So I have a theater background, but that's not really where I first ran into FileMaker. I first ran into FileMaker, I think it was at the Gartner Group. I was working in their IT department. Someone very technical had adopted it as to build their own help desk tool to manage the help desk and taking calls and manage tickets. And I was sort of, you know, just similar to Bob, just kind of thrown on my desk and said, you should figure this out. And over time, you know, I think it appealed to me because of the same thing. I was drafting designs for sets and lights, and so the visual component was definitely appealing. I had no computer science background whatsoever, but I was also an early Mac user. I bought the first Mac when I was 13, so I liked the graphical interface. The idea that this thing was a drag and drop, what you see is what you get kind of tool, made that concept of database really easy for me. And then, you know, I've been using it ever since. So I've seen the evolution. It's hard when you're inside of it to really see the incremental changes over time. But I was thinking a little bit about this coming into today. And I think for me, I think the biggest shift that has happened under our watch, whether we were aware of it or not, was not just this evolution of other tools in the low code space, but it feels like the terminology and the techniques associated with agile development and UI UX and those kinds of ideas were maybe somewhere in deep IT groups building things. And they've really come out into become more common and known, especially since 2007, when we started getting iPhones and everyday consumers were consuming apps and sort of sensitive to usability issues. And that's been, I think, the biggest thing that's impacted the evolution of FileMaker for me and for my team is this feeling like we used to be just kind of bespoke craftsmen doing our thing one on alone, and now we're working in teams and we're using sprints and we're managing usability tests and we're doing all these other things with this really phenomenal tool. And in some ways that feels like it's a catalyst. It makes this powerful visual tool even more powerful because we're using approaches to development that it's well suited to.
Right. Ernest, back in the day, I think a lot of what Chris said kind of mirrors my thoughts too. Everybody, code lines and blue screens, and all of a sudden I can use graphic tools to interact with, and the ease of use. I don't think, I think back in the day, ease of use was just the watchword for FileMaker. You could just jump in and start. You could add some fields and drag and drop and create a layout and build out a script. Where do you see the key, like, stepping stone advantages to the platform that's gotten it success?
So professionally, my background is teaching, and Max and FileMaker were big players in schools, and that's how I sort of got started. But technically, I was a web developer, and I'm kind of thinking about Chris Moyer's inflection point statement, and I'm going back to the days where, man, web development used to be just part of my French, a shit show, right? You couldn't do very much, and the things you could do were very limited, and you spent all day and you put up a little form, and then you were very happy. And then people found FileMaker, and then you can do all these things that required, very little, for lack of a better word, programming experience really reflects our business value and business productivity. And I think that story is still true, but unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, less important because the nature of work has really changed. It's not so much that I think the technology space has changed for sure, but we have to wonder why. Why has the technology space changed? And for me, part of it is that the nature of work has actually fundamentally changed. How we think about what we do, how we add value to our businesses, our organizations, our teams. It used to be that data entry was a thing. And so we built a bazillion.
Capturing data, right?
Exactly, capturing data, just getting input of things from the world into a digital system. That's like wave 1.2 of this whole technology information revolution that we've been living. But now, most of that work's being done by robots and servers and things you don't see, know, hear about. You don't have a name. It's an API. It's a 3-letter word, 4-letter word, and sometimes it's somebody that you've never met or something that you don't even have a personal relationship with. Right? It's a business. It's a company, and all this stuff is flowing all around us. And so work now is really has to be contextualized in a much broader ecosystem, not just of tech, but of what's actually being done in the workplace. So, I think in some ways, FileMaker is very well suited to play that role. I think it's a disservice to think of the dichotomy as web or cloud versus FileMaker. FileMaker is a perfectly decent cloud citizen. The challenge is how you think about what FileMaker does in the context of providing business value.
With respect to that changing, world, the business world that we're working in, you make a great point about it's not about the collecting and the capability of getting your paper Rolodex digitally encoded is no longer the win. It's once I have it here, what can I do with it? What do you feel are 3 or 4 of the platform advantages, like key platform advantages that you feel FileMaker brings to the new world order?
Well, I think low code, the value of low code platforms is overstated. And I think the reckoning will come. And part of that is because with diverse and complex ecosystems, the cost of managing diversity and complexity scales not linearly, but geometrically, right? And you at some point need to be able to manage all these integrations you're doing, all these data flows you're doing in a way that is maintainable. And most things today in sort of the integration platform space are not really maintainable. I mean, have you gone back to if this then that and try to debug what you did, 5 months ago? It's impossible. There's no debugging. It either works or it doesn't work. If something breaks, you're going back and re-engineering things, right? So I think that what we're seeing here, I'll give you one of this example. I think what we're seeing here is that low code is great until it doesn't work, and it's terrible. And so we need a space, a platform, an ecosystem where you can really bridge those two things, right? From what people are calling low code to a maintainable platform space. And FileMaker is really good at that. Now, there's some deployment issues, and we quibble about whether or not you can version things, not version things. But fundamentally, you can express things in code, and that's really important.
Yeah.
An accessible code. So I think that's one of its superpowers. And the other is that, it can play in all the ecosystems that we play in.
Yeah. Bob, when you look at where FileMaker sits right now, what do you think? 3 or 4, like boom, 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 things that we tend to take for granted. One of the things, I always forget about, but it's got like 11, it's native in 11 languages. How many native code bases are native in that? And so that's one of those, baked in things that we get for free in this platform. We don't always take advantage of it, but what are 3 or 4 of the things that you feel key strategies that are in the FileMaker product right this minute that helps position itself well in the market?
Well, I think one of the big ones for me is the fact that it's gotten a lot easier to tap into APIs that are out there. And every modern product out there has an API, and most of them follow pretty much the same paradigms, and it's easy enough to learn them and to integrate with them. And that gives us a whole bunch of functionality and a whole bunch of selling power. I've had people contact me and say, we've got this proprietary thing that we use. It's a vertical market product, and we don't know if there's anything that'll work with it. And all I have to do is spend a couple minutes on the web, sometimes while I'm talking to them, and find out, yeah, there's an API. The API looks like it follows the right, paradigms, and I can say, yeah, we can integrate with that. And, or at least I think we can. I try not to overcommit, but I haven't run into one yet where it's like, oh no, forget it, we're not going to be able to do this. That's a big one, I think, and a big selling point. I think another one is that we can deliver a user interface that is, and a whole user experience that is really, truly unique and built around the users. There are some things that I complain about. There are things I think need to be updated, but setting those aside, I still am able to design things in a way that it works for that particular customer. And it's going to meet that situation, that business rule, that process, and people are pretty blown away by that a lot of the time. They're very surprised at what we can give them. A lot of times their expectations are a little lower, and sometimes they're a little higher too. But I think the lower expectation surprise, the pleasant surprise, used to happen more a few years ago than it does now. I think people's expectations have gotten a lot higher. I think that some of the things they're doing in really good web code are beyond what FileMaker can do right now, and we need to play some catch up there.
Right.
So that's a couple of them. I don't know if I have any others on the top of my head. But.
Mark, what about you? What do you feel like things that we just take for granted that FileMaker nails that are just huge advantages right at the moment?
And I think all 3 of these things have been advantages all along. And so I think it's easy for us to take these for granted. I got 3. One is this idea that we can build it once and deploy it everywhere. Mac, PC, mobile, web. That's extremely unique in my experience. The portability, this idea that, if you build a file and it contains everything, you can put it on a thumb drive and move it off a server to another server, or take it on the road on a desktop and a laptop. That shocks IT people, and always has, that it's a self-contained system that doesn't have this invisible database somewhere and some other files somewhere that control the view, and something else that controls the security. This sort of single file concept, I think, is extremely powerful. And then the last, I think, is the flexibility. My favorite's always been the fact that you can rename almost anything and it just works. You can change your field names, you can change this. There's obviously repercussions of that, but I think that's created an environment, along with the way you can do that with scripts and the different approaches to the graph, that have allowed all of us as developers to really explore different ways to use the same tool to get things done. So there's not like a one prescribed way you have to do it. You know, it doesn't feel like it's that linear. It's extremely flexible. It's like different carpenters in a wood shop can use different tools to build a chair, but they can all end up with a chair at the end. And I think that's empowered a lot of different people to bring a lot of different perspectives, and has created a richer developer ecosystem as a result, because we can debate different approaches and things. It's not just like one way.
Really, really good point. I want to just jump up and down on that one point you just made, Mark. Really good point about the guardrails that we take for granted. You know, to be able to go in and change, you know, the name of a script, the name of a field, jack around with the code. FileMaker's got our back on that. We don't have, you know, when you're in any other platform, it's so easy. You spend half your debugging looking for syntax issues and so forth, and you don't have to do anywhere near as much of that in FileMaker. That allows you to be creative and know that they've got your back. They're looking out for, we know you're moving or changing or renaming that. We got the connections behind the scenes for you. You're right on the money there with that being a big advantage. Chris, other thoughts, other items, things that make this thing just that are huge selling points in terms of where it stands right now against some of the other platforms out there?
So regarding this moment in time, I mean, entropy is a thing, right? Yeah, the entire database market is fragmented more and more and more. There's just tons of players, but at the same time, there have been a lot more purpose-driven applications. You know, it used to be if you wanted a point of sale, you had to build a point of sale. If you wanted a CRM, you'd have to go get one. And now there's all these vertical market apps that are just off the shelf now. If you want restaurant reservations, you can find that. You know, there's an app for that. It has really taken off. And so the opportunity pool for FileMaker applications has shrunk. And I don't know that we think about that very much, but there's so much more off-the-shelf stuff available that you can just say, you know, dial 1 for an ERP system or something like that. And so FileMaker is the dial 9 for all other situations. And FileMaker is great at that. And I would argue it's the best at that of anything out there. Even people who are, air quotes, real coders and who also do FileMaker acknowledge that there is nothing better than FileMaker out there for you to bang out a prototype. And I think maybe we are a little bit dogmatic in saying, you know, we want to build the final product in FileMaker. And perhaps we should also pursue opportunities for FileMaker to be the builder of the proof of concept for something that's going to operate at a higher scale. But FileMaker would be great at doing a whole bunch of iterations and banging out a prototype that sort of smooths all the rough edges and say, okay, now you build it with industrial grade tools because this thing's going to deploy worldwide. And we don't pursue those. And I think we probably should pursue things more in that line.
I think a really good point there, Chris. I think organically we have all been seen time and time again, we built a kind of little 18-month workaround tool that's going to help until the Oracle system's built. And then 12 years later, it's still in place. So we kind of back into success that way, but to actually stick your chest out and lead with it going, you're going to want to build this in SQL Server, Mondo, et cetera. But let's get the prototype up in a couple of weeks. That's going to be your proof of concept, your storyboard, your working mock-ups or whatever. That's not necessarily a bad, again, whether you're just that, you know, those little suckers that hang on to the sharks, you know, they get their nutrition. They don't have to be the shark, but they get that ride. There's opportunities there. And again, great opportunities for success. If FileMaker is in fact the right core candidate for some of those bigger systems. We're going to talk about areas of, you know, maybe some areas of frustration with the platform, but for right now, if I had to ask each of you your single favorite experience in FileMaker. Oh my God, I love creating a custom function, or I love creating a value list, which nobody's going to say. What's your favorite experience in FileMaker? Like, what's the thing that you just go, damn, that's great. Let's start with Chris again. I'm going to go in kind of reverse order. Chris, favorite experience?
I don't know if there's any one experience, but you know, during the pandemic, one of our customers was they manufactured antibiotic wipes. And so a lot of us were sitting around during the pandemic going, damn, I wish there was something I could do to sort of pitch in and help and stuff like that. And those guys went from like 0 to 900 during the pandemic. They were absolutely slammed and they were slinging that stuff out the door as fast as they could get it. And the fact that we were able to take, you know, what was kind of an off-the-shelf ERP system for them and just totally trick it out in a matter of a couple of months was a huge win. And just the ability to do that and get something out under extreme pressure that is really richly featured.
So speed of development, just.
Yeah, it just never gets old that you can pull a rabbit out of the hat over and over again.
Mark, what, you know, Chris just did a really bad job of answering my question for me by just diffusing it and, you know, lathering it.
I'll get real specific.
What's your like, man, when I do this in FileMaker, what's the experience that you just go, that just makes me smile when I'm able to do that?
I love sub summaries. I've said it. To me, I use that, probably have used it every month, every year since I learned about FileMaker existed. Bring raw data in. I don't care if you're in table view or list view, create sub summaries, turn on or disable various sorts, leading or trailing grand summaries. It's amazing to me, the ability for you to rapidly analyze raw data in a sub summary view with almost no development time. That alone, as a business owner, I've used on our own raw data, better than filtering in Excel, easier than grouping in Excel. It's just incredibly powerful and super accessible.
Super, super underappreciated. We don't talk about it. Completely agree. Ernest, for you, what's that magic moment?
Oh, I think it's pretty basic. I still, you know, when I drag a field on the layout and I go back to browse mode, I can type something in and it works. I'm like, my God, this is still magic.
When you flip back into another platform or product or whatever, you're just banging your head against the keyboard on that one thing, right?
Oh, it's lines of Visual Studio Code to get this little component to sit on the page correctly. You know?
Bob, what's your sweet spot that, like, oh my God, this is just so fast and easy each time I do it?
As many complaints as I have about this particular part of FileMaker, which is themes and styles, still sometimes being able to just, you know, tweak one little thing and make it go system wide, you know, with just a couple of clicks that's still kind of a magic moment for me. It was really big magic when it came out. There's a lot of flaws in that now, and that I see, and, you know, having used themes and styles for years, I realized that it's a pretty poorly implemented tool in a lot of ways, but it still has, you know, this certain, you know, the ability to be consistent across an entire system is just magic to me, because there was a time when you know, having that kind of consistency meant it took more discipline than most people have, including myself at times. And so it's really nice to have that.
I don't know if you guys are noticing a broad theme about Bob saying good things about the design surface and then hedging at the same time about some things that we're going to be talking about in a minute.
Maybe certain people will see this, Dave. Maybe,
right.
Maybe this will trickle up in the right
this
direction.
is going on YouTube, bros. So that's good. For me, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in with just sort of two thoughts. The two things that I always say are the magic of FileMaker. Layout mode, script mode, you know, script maker, you know, whatever the scripting workspace, those are where we spend all of our time. They are incredibly, and, you know, the part that Ernest just said, dragging a field, boom, you know, right click on it, throw a value list in there. Layout mode is still, it's not, there are other platforms that have made and or improve upon that, but that's still a pretty strong space to work in. And the script workspace, i.e. script maker for us old dogs, still sort of a, you know, a relatively simple macro language, but that's not the seller for me. The thing to me that's the best thing, and I think we all just take this for granted, find mode. That is such a thing that we take for granted, where we just go, you teach a brand new user, oh, you just go into the last name field and type in KNI, you'll get Knight, you know, to show them how to do a couple of ranges or use the index or whatever. I can teach somebody some relatively, you know, simple find techniques in a couple of seconds as an end user. You know, instead of SQL queries and having to build all your filters and so forth, it's such a powerful thing we take for granted. So that to me is my sort of thing. I hope they never redo that or improve that to a point where we lose what we have right now, because I think that's just such an area of of benefit for the platform. And again, for us developers, yay, like Mark was saying, for our own internal stuff, I want to do some complex searches, I can, but for every user that touches a keyboard that uses FileMaker, I think that's a benefit. And I always look, it's funny, I always talk to Mark, I always talk to Rick Kalman when he's talking about a new release of the product, and I go, what's new in browse mode? What's the cool new feature that the end user is going to be able to go, I can make a PDF, or I can do a quick search, or I can do a snapshot link. What are the things in browse mode that improve the product? So we've talked a little bit about the design surface. Some people seem to have impressions in this room that there's room for improvement there. Bob, give us your well thought out critique of that particular area.
I don't know how well thought out it'll be, but it's something I have thought about quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, there's some very specific things that need some work. Overall, let me start with this. Overall, I would say the design surface in FileMaker is still pretty good. Like Ernest was saying, the fact that you can just drag things around and make them work. And under Heather's tutelage, I think Claris went a long way towards making it much better than it was before that. And some of those things still hold up pretty well. Particularly like the drag and drop tools and so forth, or not the drag and drop, but I mean the spacing tools, the way they give you hints and guides and so forth. Spacing and alignment tools. But the things that really need the most work to me is, for God's sakes, this is a nitpick, and I put this up on the discussion area for Claris, but why can't we have a field type that combines the best features of a drop-down menu, or a drop-down list, and a pop-up menu? Why do we have to stack two fields in order to manage to enter an ID and show the data that ID represents without it being exposed? Why does that have to be so hard? And they all know that we have to do it, and they don't even want us to stack things up. So why don't they give us a way to not have to stack things up, besides having to use a pop-up menu, which has its own set of problems when it comes to things like trying to tab into it, for example, and the fact that they've gotten really weird looking with modern OSs. Another big one is, I already mentioned it, is I think the themes and styles goes only so far, and it could be way better. It could have a way to actually go directly into the CSS and edit it, maybe with some guardrails to help keep us from being idiots with it. Being able to style some of the things that we can't style directly right now, without a bunch of unauthorized extra coding, like scroll bars, and being able to actually see, like being able to maybe apply those styles universally across a whole bunch of objects that are of a similar type, like fields and drop downs and pop-ups and so forth. The date, calendar drop downs and so forth. Sometimes you want all those things to look the same, and you have to manually go through a lot of work to make that happen. So I'm getting pretty pedantic with this, but those are some really big ones for me. I'm sure if I really thought about it and tore it apart, I would make myself very unhappy by coming up with about 20 more.
Yeah. Mark,
About where I am right now.
Let's say Bob from doing that exactly. What are design surface? What do you love? What would you like to see different? And by the way, Bob, I think we're all going to kind of stand up and go, styles and themes are, they're better. They're not what they could be. I think we're all going to probably bang that drum a little bit. But Mark, what are your thoughts on the design surface?
So this is my weakest topic, because I spend so little time, like Molly was saying. I spend a lot less time these days developing. But I think this is still a challenge, and hopefully I'm wrong. Cloning layout parts between layouts. You can duplicate a layout. You can copy objects between layouts. But if I want to grab a layout with its various parts and widths and such like that, I still got a lot of prep to do on the target that I'm going to paste to. And so much else is smart about copying and pasting in FileMaker, to have that one piece still require me to like prep my target before I copy and move stuff over, and versus duplicate the whole layout and then have to call a bunch of stuff out of it. It just feels like a lot more work there to borrow those kinds of spacings and
Yeah.
things between layouts than there should be.
Yeah, Ernest, what about you? What are your thoughts on the design surface? You're muted, Ernest.
I'm with Bob. I mean, I think that there's a very, very long list of things I want to complain about. But I think the core, if I could wave a magic wand, I would say that FileMaker simply needs to behave like a modern web-ish experience. I mean, you need to borrow from web behaviors that people understand. We need to have richer components that we don't have to retool. And we just need to reduce the number of, undifferentiated work that we do all the time, repeating things, copying things from layout to layout, not being able to have master objects or shareable objects. All those things are fairly basic things that any modern IDE in this, design surface space expects.
I think you're making, you said earlier, Ernest, you talked about sort of culturally where we are, the business world, the world is different than we were years ago when FileMaker came in and said, hey, we can capture your data. We're all talking about interactions and so forth, but you're also talking culturally about technologists who expect a certain IDE experience working with a lot of other tools. If you're having to work in a waterfall mentality in a now agile world, that's a rough fit. That's a headwind to compliance and feeling compatible. If you've got a design surface interface that's not in line with most IDEs, that's also another point of friction at some point for adoption in the marketplace as well, right?
It's even worse than that, right? I mean, it's that, and going back to how work has changed. FileMaker is still optimized for the work of yesterday. The thing that I love, to be able to drag a field and put it in a layout and type some data in, that's the least important kind of work there is today. What's more important? Being able to aggregate data, display it beautifully, be able to integrate, fuse things together, to have rich design surfaces, to disclose things in a dynamic way. All those things are things that we spend a lot of time, just doing stupid FileMaker tricks to overcome, or going straight to the web and dropping an add-on a web container. But then sort of begs the question, right? Why do that?
Chris, design surface, any sort of personal loves, peeves, or just out, basically what they said. What are your thoughts on the design surface?
Yeah, I tend to agree a lot with Ernest's position on this. CSS is a technology that exists under the hood in FileMaker, and yet it's only sort of partially implemented. And so the kinds of stuff you could do with a web page that would appear on different form factors of devices, you can't replicate that behavior in FileMaker, even though CSS is governing some of the behaviors. And so FileMaker has its own kind of structure that it uses to manage sliding objects and things moving around and stuff like that. But there's already a better mousetrap. It's widely understood, widely used. It's frustrating to me that FileMaker doesn't just throw in the towel and say, okay, no one wants to use our stuff. Let's just use the industry standard. And so, as Ernest said, you have all these really cumbersome workarounds to try and replicate something that should be easy.
Yeah. One of the things that also strikes me, when we start talking about this, especially with themes and styles, one of the things that I think Clara/FileMaker over the years has done, they bring us new features, and then we start to use the crap out of them, and then it becomes unmanageable, right? So we go, oh my gosh, I've got 900 scripts, or I've got, all of these objects on a layout, and years go by. And then they go, hey, we're going to give you a way to filter what you're seeing on your layout. We're going to give you the ability to search within scripts. We're going to give you these, right? So they give you some organizational tools to help manage the complexity of this tool that they've given you, right? So the tool that manages the tool. And a perfect example, like one example of that, the graph, we don't have great tools for helping us manage the graph. We don't have great tools. I think Bob kind of alluded, with the CSS and FileMaker, we have to be really disciplined, and it can get really complex to do the themes and styles a certain way, but we don't have a lot of inherent tools to help us organize that hierarchy and those things, right? This is for anybody or nobody.
You know, it seemed like a few years ago, I want to say this was about the time that, was it Heather Winkle joined? There was some, you know, there was some, it was clear that as they were redesigning some components of the interface, maybe it was Robert showing things at DevCon or Engage, wherever we were in the timeline of naming there, that they were being more thoughtful about those changes that they were making, that before they were going to modify a component, like let's say that the calculation dialog box, right? Like there's that the ubiquitous component of the FileMaker platform. And at some point it's going to get some attention and redesign. And I sense that that perspective is mature. This idea that we'll just make this one tweak or add this new feature, but not think about how that will scale. It was hopefully something in the past, but I'm kind of curious if people are seeing now like the beginnings of new features they've introduced where it's clear that they're being short-sighted, because all the things you mentioned, David, like managing layouts, managing scripts, managing parts and objects on the layouts and groups or layers or
value lists, etc. Yeah.
All those things clearly we're going to scale and we're going to need, I mean, hindsight's 2020. We all knew we were going to need better tools eventually, and we all stumbled into it and then we got them, but there was a lot of difficulty managing that stuff up front. I'm curious if people are seeing evidence of new features that will inevitably scale, which don't seem like they've had that treatment. Because I was pretty encouraged by the thoughtfulness they were putting into redesigning some of those elements.
Yeah, Ernest, you got your hand up. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to say something that I may regret. So let's see how this goes. You know, as much as I complain about the design surface, I actually think it's probably the least important problem area of FileMaker. Right? I mean, I think that I'd love to build rich, beautiful apps in FileMaker, but I think it's real strength. It's not about that. Right? I think it goes back to something I think you mentioned earlier, and somebody else brought up. You know, we've positioned FileMaker as this like anti-real system. This is a juxtaposition against like the real database or real application. I think we need to get over that, because I think the nature of how innovation is happening has radically changed, and is changing, you know, in a much more fluid, dynamic fashion. Meaning, non-precious early innovations happening at scale and rapidly is where things are going. Things that get thrown away quickly, things that have short lifespans, things that come up, produce a lot of value, and then you change, right? I mean, it's the value of spending a lot of time and energy getting pixel perfect in things is not as important as it used to be. But if you're building a product, you may care about that, but you're not building a quote unquote product, then your mindset needs to probably shift to be aligned with what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, with some of the platforms too, Ernest, it's not hard in a FileMaker system of today to build an interface. Like Bob was saying, we still build great interfaces. You can build an interface that trumps most of the things that you see in Salesforce or Airtable, you know, to extremes of the marketplace. You can compete already right now with those, even though we've got some wherewithals that we'd like to see internally as experts. We'd like to see some things change. We're not lagging in the what the end product can present.
And I spent years being a champion of UI, UX, and design surfaces. And I mean, I like beautiful design. I mean, that's what makes me happy, right? But I think the value of what we're actually doing with FileMaker is not so much about polish visually, but about capturing and solving problems rapidly and in a way that promotes change. Change is our friend, right? We need to really lean into it, because this is the one platform that allows us to do this at a pace that rivals anything that's out there.
Yeah. I want to, you know, and again, we've touched on that, you know, that really just kind of resoundingly amplifies what Chris said earlier. You know, this COVID impacted company that, you know, went from 0 to 900 overnight, that we take that for granted. It's baked in. You know, everybody is skirting around the issue, and it's because we see it, but integration, right? This is something I think if you were to turn the clock back 5 years ago, were we integrating, ODBC with SQL systems and, some of that sort of thing? And yes, we were doing some light integrations and so forth. I don't know anybody worth his salt as a FileMaker developer who's not either trying to or deeply integrating it with other systems. Chris, how are we doing there, and where do you see this going?
I think FileMaker is great at it, and I would argue it's better at it than most. Just because FileMaker, if you just want to really talk down to FileMaker and say it's just a glorified wrapper, it can talk to a bunch of stuff, but it's got the ability to communicate by email or send SMS if you want, or talking to other notification services. And you can build really elaborate error trapping, say, did this work or not? Oh, tell somebody about it. And so the fact that it integrates with a ton of stuff, especially with its sort of more recent ability to do really well with APIs. And then you have this communication layer, and you have this whole logic layer where you can say, hey, if that didn't go right, or if it went slightly off, and to be able to do conditional logic branching around all of that, I think is just fantastic, and really something that, again, we kind of undersell because FileMaker is really good at it.
Yeah, Bob, where do you see the integration? Again, one of the things that I'm looking at today, I think SpaceX just launched a capsule that's connecting to the International Space Station. When I'm talking with customers, I always go API. It's like the docking station at the space station. The Japanese, the Russians, the Americans, we can all pass information back and forth. Where do you see the API and integration world going from where it's at now, Bob?
I think that there's going to be more and more and more of that kind of interoperability between apps. And I think it's going to become more of a selling point over time. I think that people, a couple of years ago, if I said API, people didn't know what I was talking about. I had to explain what an API was. Now I would say a good half of my customers, the first time it comes up, they already know what an API is. And the reason for that is that, it's just becoming part of the common parlance. Just like, good UX design was not something that anybody cared about until they did. I think people are going to care more about that because, they look at it as a way to solve their problems, and they look at what they're already using, and they don't want to let go of some of the tools that they have. If they're using Slack heavily, guess what? FileMaker integrates really great with Slack. And there's a ton of little things that you can do with it that are pretty cool and flashy, as well as really useful. And just the fact that we can just reach right out and just grab some information. We've been able to do it for a long time, but it's gotten super easy now. We have a client who, they wanted us to pull down a bunch of info about a vehicle type, make and model and year and all that stuff just based on the VIN, right? Now we can do that in, under a second and give them everything that they wanted. And all they have to do is just, copy and paste a VIN from somewhere, and they know a whole bunch of new information. That's not groundbreaking, but for them it was. And it was super easy to do. It didn't cost them hardly anything for us to do it. So I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think people are going to become more demanding about that, about, okay, you have to integrate with this thing we already have, or with this thing that we want to use. It's not necessarily going to be about building, this, soups and nuts ERP anymore, as much as integrating with things that they already have or want to use.
Yeah, and using the right tool for the job. I don't need to build MailChimp inside a FileMaker. I could, but oh my God, Ernest, one of your first answers today was about FileMaker sitting in this exact space. What are your thoughts?
I would like all of us to rise up and embrace this idea that we're modern FileMaker developers. Right? I think we can lean into this idea that there's this whole modern FileMaker revolution that's happening, and we're just the tip of the iceberg and tip of the spear, making this phenomenal. And what does that mean? For me, modern FileMaker has the following characteristics, right? It's connected, it's cloud first, and it's fast. Not fast in the sense that it's it is going to be the MySQL database, but it's fast in terms of delivering value. And the experience is fast, and it's performant, right? And it's accessible. That's the key. We need to build, design accessible systems. And FileMaker is fantastic at that. We just got to build that way, right? It's agile. We talked about agile in the chat, meaning your software development practices need to allow for change and to be subject to things that support iteration. And then lastly, and this goes to Bob's point, it's got to have a modern experience. It needs to look great and great enough, not so great that it rivals your iOS application or your Android app or your web app, right? But it has, and Claris can do a lot of work to support those things. But I think we're there. I mean, I think those are the characteristics that we should be shooting for.
Yeah, Mark, you know, one of the things, was it you or Chris that was talking about build it in one platform and it deploys everywhere. Part of that is we don't have to integrate as much because we can do that. But what are the other benefits and or rub points for you on the API, the integration component of FileMaker?
So this is a great question in part because I had like a follow-up I wanted to say to something Chris said about how there's all these apps out there now and it feels like it's a dwindling opportunity for custom, and something Ernest said about you know, maybe it's not about building these monolithic systems, maybe it's about building things that you would tear down shortly after you use them, kind of just-in-time apps, right? And I kind of feel a little bit of pushback in myself about that because I had similar impressions in the past, and I know nobody's making generalized comments, but I think it kind of dovetails with APIs in my head. For me, I think that the growth of FileMaker integrations with APIs, when you compare it to like the SQL examples you gave, David, is those things were fairly rigid and fragile. If you were importing and exporting data, or you were working with a SQL system that was live potentially, it was very difficult for that to adapt to change. You know, if someone changed the SQL environment, you may have to go in and do some real coding. If someone changed one column in your export-import from traditional EDI, which we used to push stuff back and forth from FileMaker server, it could break a bunch of stuff and create chaos. And APIs provide this stability, right? If they're well-written APIs, it's a black box. You're talking in a language, it's dealing with the complexity. As those platforms evolve, they have backwards compatibility. And I think we're leaning into that, right? We have to trust that the platforms that we're integrating with using APIs aren't going to like change things overnight or suddenly without warning. They're going to be backwards compatible with the simple set of instructions maybe that we're giving them today. And I think that makes for much more reliable systems that we build with integration than maybe the previous options, not just more choice, but more reliability. But there's some challenges I think that come up for me in terms of the, you know, we're seeing a lot more, I thought the same thing, Chris, like they were going to be, you know, fewer opportunities. And what I'm seeing is that every time a client comes to me and they have a need, and I say, well, is there something in the marketplace already? Because we don't want to reinvent that wheel. So often they've found, yeah, there's 2 or 3 options, but they're pretty terrible. Or they do 90% of what I want to do or 80% of what I do, but they still don't do everything I want to do, and I want to do it my way. And we're so used to now to get everything, like every news feed on our phone and device is customized to us. I still think there's a thirst out there for custom solutions that fit clients the way they want. We have enormous demand for some of our clients to just build things that are one of a kind. And I would have thought that would have dwindled. A consultant of mine brought that up like 7 years ago. Like, this space is going to get smaller. What are we going to do to survive? And I just feel like the space is getting bigger for custom, not smaller. I also finding more of the systems we build stick around. The number of clients you have out there with 20-year-old systems that continue to thrive is amazing. So I don't know. Yeah, we build little utilities now and again and throw them away, but a lot of what we build lasts and grows. And that goes well with this idea of APIs. If we can outsource those things, that's great. And odds are with APIs, it can be a lot more stable. The last point I'll make, I think, is that there's some challenges with that we're starting to notice. We ourselves are building a system now that is hybrid of Jira and Tempo and HubSpot and FileMaker and QuickBooks Online. And the mapping of terminology between those systems is a big challenge. Just talking about it internally, they call an account a company. There's so many different terms that they use, customer, and it can get really confusing. And I think that's true anytime you use APIs. They don't all call the entities the same things, and it's not easy to change that. FileMaker can change it, but those other systems are fairly set. And then the other thing is, even though the source of truth might exist in system A, it's rare that all the attributes you want to describe on that object exist in system A. We're often finding that FileMaker, we might want to say that customers are defined in QuickBooks, but not all the fields I need about customers are defined in QuickBooks. They can't be, they don't fit in there. So there are some new challenges, I think, that these APIs bring up, mapping names and putting all the attributes with the source of truth when sometimes you're forced to split them. We have a lot more bi-directional syncing with APIs than I thought we would have. I thought we'd have a lot more push this to there and let it do its thing. And we're finding that so often I can't push it there alone. I have to somehow push and pull in order to really get the whole picture.
Yeah, if we're going to be master translators, if we're going to be the centerpiece and the hub, it means all of the translations that have to happen, we have to have a certain amount of expertise with them. There's a lot of languages out there, you know, and again, not with respect to JavaScript, JSON, et cetera, but just learning the capabilities of all these partnering apps that we want to integrate with. There's a cost of going, we're not in a silo anymore, but now that you have all these pipes and connections, it takes a bit of space. You know, one other thought that, you know, we're talking about integration, and just one of the thoughts I wanted to kind of augment this with is, we've had a couple of projects recently where FileMaker is not the centerpiece. We're building some pretty extensive Twilio systems, you know, call tree tracking systems, where literally FileMaker is just a nice GUI interface to help control and throw switches and be the control center. And we were doing a complete, you know, kind of a native React Node.js system, and the customer needed a specific type of PDF generation. And rather than grabbing an engine and strapping all those libraries, and we're like, we could, the load was going to be very low on this, and we're like, we could just strap a little FileMaker thing that comes in here, generates the PDF, and sends an email out. So FileMaker was sort of this tiny component on a bigger system in both of those situations. And I think we need to get comfortable, you know, Chris talking about working a prototype of a bigger system, but also FileMaker being a component of a larger system or an ecosystem of multiple platforms talking with each other. It doesn't always have to be the centerpiece, right? Chris, you stepped out. I want to quiz you on everything that Mark said while you were down, but any closing thoughts on the integration stuff here?
Yeah, I think, you know, with the rise of these visualization analytics tools and stuff like that, these class of tools called ETL tools for export, transform, and load have started to become, you know, part of the conversation. And to that end, FileMaker's great at it. You can connect to like a fixed length mainframe feed and like pluck out stuff you need, or you can combine fields and then push them off somewhere else. So FileMaker's you know, great facility for transforming data and combining and splitting data and stuff like that is a real strength. And there are whole software suites dedicated to that one job, and FileMaker just has it built in. So I think that's another strength that we never talk about.
Yeah. I'm going to pivot a little bit. I got a bunch of stuff we could talk about. I think we could fill 3 hours, the five of us, just spinning on about a number of things, but I want to talk a little bit. You know, one of the things in the earlier segment, Molly and Lynn were talking about the seeding of new developers, you know, growing the developer pool and so forth. Bob, what do you see in terms of, you know, things that Claris can do, or things that are successful, things that need attention, perhaps, in terms of growing that pool of talent?
First of all, I think they should make FileMaker Pro free and charge for server. It's the other way around right now. You know, it's your point of entry is supposed to be low, you know, and then when people build something and now, oh, now I want to share it. Oh, okay, now I got to have FileMaker server. Now I got to spend some money, but everybody sees the value in this thing, so they're going to spend that money. It's a much more frictionless way to do things, and I think it would grow the platform. Just that one thing alone, I think, would grow the platform. I think beyond that, you know, we've all been saying the same things for years, you know, get it into the schools. I don't care if you have to, you know, airdrop it into students' backpacks. You got to get FileMaker into the schools somehow. You got to get people using it early on, because even if they grow past it, you know, and they decide, oh, I want these bigger, more muscle-bound tools to get my job done, they're still always going to see it as something in their toolbox that they can go back to and use. And that again would grow the platform. And the last thing I'd say is they got to get it together on the marketing. And I have no idea what I mean by that, as far as, you know, I think you probably have a lot more ideas than I do, Dave, but
we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, it's just a disaster right now. I mean, well, it's just, you know, people don't know what it is, or you get the terrible answer of, oh yeah, I used to use that back, you know, 20 years ago, and I didn't even think it was still around anymore.
And that one statement, I used to use it 20 years ago. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but that is the one statement that FileMaker can say that hardly anybody else can, and I don't feel that's being leveraged. That's
Very
such
true.
an advantage. I used to drive a 1971 Mustang. There's a Mustang that's new and better and hotter and so forth. That's such an advantage. Mark, without getting swayed too much, what do you see in terms of growing that developer pool, getting same sort of thing? I think we're all going to go, free product or freemium or lower cost of entry. That's such a huge barrier. Any other thoughts you have there?
I'm not convinced that Claris can solve that problem, to be honest. I think it's such a huge lift with all the other things that they need to work on from marketing and product development and better components for the interface. I mean, the list goes on. This idea that they're going to be able to create a master learning path or, solve the problem with just seeding the product in the market or get it into schools. I just have a low confidence that will ever truly bear fruit, not because it couldn't, but because it just the lift is big. I keep coming back to like what we're trying to figure out to do with our junior developers. And, call me old fashioned, like one of the things we give them is FTS 15, right? And tell them to read that first chapter, especially, and then go through a few more modules. Like having that comprehensive tool to train someone, 0 to 60 through the basics functionality across the platform was pretty useful. Back in the day. And between that and productive computing and a few others that put out there in the marketplace, we're finding, and I'm learning by talking to other developers, that the best way for us, I think, to grow the developers is to build them ourselves.
Yeah.
And the best way we can do that is to get them, to be honest, building as quickly as possible. We all learn this, I think, muscle memory through practice, right? Not through study. And if anything we can do to replicate that, task the work out so that someone has to create 100 layouts or create 50 objects or create a bunch of fields or create a system from scratch. These are the kinds of things that develop that muscle memory. That's how most of us learned how to do it. And it feels like it's got to be a grassroots thing to me personally.
Chris, what do you see in terms of growing that pool?
So to me, I think the fundamental problem that gets into why they won't give away a free version is that FileMaker has not cracked the code on what they want to do about licensing. The reason they don't want to give away a free version is like, that's going to be too big of a revenue hit. And so they need to look at some of these new licensing models that frankly, all their competitors are doing and figure that out so that they can, have a a frictionless cost of entry to get new people into it. And then I agree with Mark that education is important, but if you look at, the typical scenario I always have in my head is like, crap, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I have something I got to slam out. I'm stuck. I need to find a resource right now. So maybe I go onto Udemy or something like that and spin up a couple videos and watch that. But if you go to like bubble.io's website, they have like a little on browser tutorial that you can actually click through and say, here's how you use the tool. And you click this and here's a more advanced version of the basic steps. And so to be able to spin yourself up, self-serve education without reading a book, you're actually on the website, actually interacting with what looks to be the tools is huge. And so if you could have a free tier, you have some online tutorials that people could just walk through so they can at least get rolling to build something basic, I think would be enormous. But the root of all of this is that they have not figured out what they want to do about licensing. And until they crack that, I think it's going to continue to be a problem.
Yeah. Ernest, close this out for us.
I actually think that the traditional source of talent in the FileMaker community and the FileMaker developer pipeline of subject matter experts and domain experts is still an under-tapped environment. Right? And this is kind of a superpower of ours. We really bring people in who are not computer scientists or programmers and whatnot, and they start with some domain expertise and business acumen, and they solve problems, and they have a solving problem mindset rather than a programming mindset. And that's first. I think it would be a shame to lose that. But I think both Mark and Chris and all of us, I think, are getting around the problem. The problem is the funnel is pretty small. And so we've got to vastly increase the funnel of awareness for those people who might pick up a tool, like a productivity tool. Like, today, if you want to solve a formula problem, you reach for Google Sheets or Excel. If you want to solve I want to track something problem, I want to capture, something that I need to keep track of. What do? FileMaker needs to compete for those eyeballs. And I think that a free tier It's one way to go. My entire take on this is that, you know, the file used to be where work was done. It's not anymore. It's where work gets started. Work gets done in the cloud with cloud systems, cloud ecosystems. So the licensing should reflect that. Make the cost of entry low, make the awareness, you know, wider, and then we can throw in education and bring them into our teams and teach them and grow them and do all these kinds of things.
Yeah,
first, we need the funnel.
The funnel, which goes into my conversation about marketing. You guys have all heard me, you know, beat the drum about the marketing. This is where I'm going to speak for a second, and I want to hear you guys' thoughts. There are only two areas of focus in my mind, not really, but the two main areas of focus: make the product great, tell everybody about it. End of story. End of story. So if Claris does a fantastic job of marketing this product, the phones are going to ring for everybody. We're going to see training programs. The market is going to support. We're going to see more plugins. We're going to see more FBA shops get formed. We're going to see more people leave their day jobs like Molly did and become FileMaker developers. We're going to see training programs come back online in ways that we have. Again, money fixes everything. So I think and counter to what Ernest said, Ernest, your point about that, again, these are all the badges that have been used over the years: knowledge worker, subject matter expert, citizen developer, problem solver. That's the same person. It's the same person we've been talking about for 20 years. I have not seen that lead to widespread growth of this platform. I don't think this platform is more larger and more vibrant and has a larger command of the market space than it did a number of years ago. So that to me is an important component. But all those 20 and 30-year-olds 20 years ago are now 50 and 60-year-olds. They're the CEOs, they're the decision makers, they're the business owners. What are we doing to reach out to them and go, remember that really cute little program you used back in your first job? It's now web, it's mobile, it's API, it's scalable, it's got 11 languages, it's still here, it's part of Apple. That to me is another approach that I see missing from the game plan in terms of going after the non-geek, the business owner, the decision maker, the IT person. I think that is another untapped avenue of resource. I've seen, you know, there's some nice little white papers they're preparing for us right now for IT specific stuff. But Bob, what are your thoughts on terms of where you see the marketing, what you'd like to see from it?
Well, I'd like to see, you know, a lot of people commented on this, but I remember at one point they showed us, is that a DevCon? They showed us a thing that they had on their website for a while. It was kind of hard to find once you wanted to find it, but it was just a little animated video. It didn't have any people in it. It was just a bunch of graphics of little objects moving around, kind of illustrating the idea of, you know, we can take your business processes and we can turn them into apps that you can use to drive your business, you know, and it mentioned that there were professional developers. It had everything we wanted. And everybody gave the feedback, oh my God, do more stuff like that. And then not a damn thing happened. And, you know, it would be great to see them get serious and sober about talking about FileMaker, because then the people who feel serious and sober about their companies and you know, the companies they work for or the businesses they own are going to take it seriously. And right now, they just, you know, they've tried to get cute in about 10 different ways. None of it has worked. I don't want to bring up farmers. I don't want to watch Dave's head explode, but the guy with the little ponytail, you know, in the boardroom and you know,
Whale song.
Those were way too dumb. And they've got to get stuff out there. And it's not that. I think they've probably got the budget to do those little animated videos, those little explainers that just say, here's what it is, here's what it can do for you. You know, it does all these things. It's uniquely in the space. You know, that's what people do nowadays. That, you know, they'll watch a video if it's about something that they're curious about.
Mark, what are your, one of the other things, I was talking with somebody at Claris the other day, and I just made this comment. I said, I'm driving around LA. I have easily seen 10 billboards, not digital ads, just billboards of Monday.com. Like, I'm like, oh my God, and so these guys are coming at it. What are some areas that you'd like to see improved, or what do you like, or what would you like to see improvement on in terms of the marketing?
So you mentioned one of them already, and that is the proactive resources for IT. That TCO document that was, circa 2004, whatever it was a really phenomenal document. And I haven't reviewed the email that we just several of us got a few days ago, just sort of announcing some new resources, but I'm hopeful that there's some great stuff in there. And the other one, I think, was 2 CMOs ago. I remember sitting down at DevCon and saying, there's no economic buyer on your website. Like, I want a front door which says you got 2 choices. You're either a developer or you're a subject matter expert or you're a problem solver, whatever it is, you go left. And if you're a decision maker, a business owner, an economic buyer, a director, or someone who's got people to make more productive and efficient, you go this way and we'll tell you why this platform is worth investing in. Because that's who we're selling to. Champions and subject matter experts, they already are sold. They have a problem, they see a light at the end of the tunnel, but they don't have the juice to buy it. It's the people above them often, or the owner of the company, who's going to be the one who decides whether they invest in this direction and potentially, sign on for 20 years of something, or if it's going to be a wasted effort, which they've probably done with something else. We've all had a client who came to you after they've lost $50,000 to $100,000 on a failed Salesforce implementation, who doesn't have the budget anymore to build what they should have built with you in the first place. And there's very little that I think on the website that speaks to the success for decision makers that this platform can bring. And I don't know what their plans are to put something up there that speaks to them.
One of the metaphors that I've used in talking with people about the platform is I point to Home Depot. There's 2 entrances. There's the builder entrance, big, wide, it's dirty. There's big aisles. You can pull your truck right in. And then there's the consumer entrance, or the decision maker, who says, I want that dishwasher. I shopped, I made the decision, but I want that dishwasher. And there's a tag there. This guy will install it for $150, right? That person, that prosumer, that decision maker, is the fastest growing segment for Home Depot. It's not their commercial, but they do have 2 entrances and they have 2 different experiences. And to your point, Mark, I think bifurcating who they approach, that decision maker, economic buyer, versus the geek who wants to roll up their sleeves and do it. I think we're only seeing one of those messages right now. Ernest, what are your thoughts in terms of you talked about that funnel. How does that funnel get bigger?
I like the economic buyer framing. But I think that we're fundamentally up against a cultural problem, right? So you think about what's different about FileMaker versus, say, ClickUp on Monday. Well, with Monday.com and ClickUp, the economic buyer can log on, put a credit card in, and immediately produce something of value. Right. They can see the results of the action instantaneously. They may not be the expert, they can delegate it out and say, oh, Team B, I kicked this title, take a look at it, tell me what you think, and off you go. In our space, the decision and the result of that decision, the impact of that decision from an economic buying perspective is long, right? The timescales of seeing what happens when you buy FileMaker is enormously challenging to get across. So, and as a result, you can't connect the dots, right? So it's nice to talk about economic buyers, but really what we have is a cultural problem, because the actual work is being done by people in silos, and those silos get crushed by IT. So you got to give messaging to people, the economic buyers, a way of thinking about the value of their work that supports the kind of things that are being done with FileMaker. So it's like we have to sell to the economic buyers, but we need new language about what's important. Right? It's not just a database. It's not an application development environment. It's about transforming your businesses. It's about harnessing the kind of innovation that's grassroots and ground up rather than top down. And those are the kinds of things that we can win around, but we're not doing. So I agree with all that. I think that we need a much larger awareness campaign. That you should see FileMaker everywhere, but you should see FileMaker as a message not about just being the better D-Days or better whatever, like the better Airtable. It should be about fundamentally transformative. And you should give people a reason to take a risk at it. And we're not doing that right now.
Chris, bring us home. Marketing, pros, cons, different approach. What are your thoughts?
Well, I wanted to tag off of Mark's comment about the economic buyer, and that is that, everybody and their dog has heard of ransomware these days. And so people are terrified of the security implementation or implications of, having a subject matter expert, or AKA a security amateur, run wild on the network with some unvetted application. So the only way you're going to be able to get a yes out of an economic buyer is if you partner with IT and say, look, this thing is airtight, you have encryption, you need to talk about all this. Like, you're not going to have your ass handed to you if you let someone take off with their kind of homegrown application. And so I think that absolutely has to be part of the conversation, or you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, I think one positive that I think I've seen especially in the last year, from Claris, is the inclusion of their developer squadron, right? We've all been here doing this thing for years. You talk about the advantages, multi-language, iOS, et cetera, et cetera. One of the advantages, wow, we've got 1,400 developers worldwide that know this product like the back of their hand and can help you get from point A to B. I think FileMaker has shown an increase in the awareness of what this strategic advantage is. So I think that's a positive tool. I want to pivot just a little bit. I want to kind of talk to you guys. You guys are sitting here mostly just because you know me, or you owe me a favor or something stupid like that. But you guys are all real successful businessmen. You guys have been running shops for 10 plus years each, I'm assuming. I want 3 success. There's a lot of people on this group, people that will watch this later. What are 3 tips? Come up with 3 things that you go, man, these are 3 things I wish somebody had told me 10 years ago when I was starting my business. Let's start with Ernest. Ernest, 3 things that you go, man, this is something that might help somebody coming up behind me. And you're muted.
Am I muted?
I mean, having Corn Walker, that's a pro and a con, right? That's there's some things there.
I'll tell him you said that.
Yeah.
I think the top of my head, I would say that it's very easy to do too much, because this platform gives us the freedom to think that we can do a lot, and we tend to not focus, and we tend to spread ourselves pretty thinly. And so I think, paying attention to what scales and not doing dumb, undifferentiated work. It's a lesson I learned very late in my career, but I wish somebody had set me down and said, hey, you don't need to do everything. You need to pick your battles. But then I think the most important point, would be people.
Yeah.
It's all about people.
Chris, what about you? Ernest just took the chicken way out by saying people 3 times, but do you have 3 things that you go, oh, I wish somebody had kicked me over the head with that stuff 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I agree with Ernest that you shouldn't try and do anything, but there's a way to sort of maximize the outcome of that. And so if you're confronted with, multiple opportunities, you can, you might get a phone call and someone says, hey, my report's not printing right anymore. And that's the engagement, right? As you do that, or you might have something that could lead to long ongoing stuff. Obviously, you want to focus your efforts on getting these, spend your energy where you can do the most good, and where you can do the most good tends to be on the larger projects or more consultative projects where your expertise can really be brought into play. And so, given 10 opportunities, focus on the 3 that are kind of the highest gain. And as far as priming the pump, I think Robert Nod has done a great job of this lately. He's, relatively new to hanging out his own shingle, but pump out the content, man. If you discover something cool, share it with the community and get your name out there, go to user groups, be omnipresent, be zealous. And so if you have something to share, share it. And, it's sort of organic marketing that you find something cool and you solve a problem that somebody else recognizes as their problem, then things will naturally accrue to you. And that's only 2, but that's all I can think of off the top of my head.
Mark, what about you? I like those, by the way, Chris, and I like that that be omnipresent, that is something that can help you in so many different ways. It makes you attractive to new developers. It makes you viable to a customer. It just helps enforce a lot of things about your business in a positive way. So Mark, what are your thoughts?
So my three are: lean on the collective wisdom of your team, including your most junior people. All of us is smarter than any one of us.
Yeah.
And you never know what someone will say if they're given the opportunity to. It might really change the way you do your business. Another, I think, is to have processes. Having a sales process, having a development process, this helps you manage expectations. It helps you create a quality experience and quality code. It's a lot easier to do things right up front than it is to repair things afterwards. And that's true with relationships with clients as well as with your software. And the last is, as hard as it sounds like it is, get paid in advance whenever you can. It's easier than it sounds. Businesses die because they run out of cash, not because they run out of profit. You could be unprofitable for a while, but you can only run out of cash once. And I think in any industry, colleagues of mine in business groups I'm in that aren't even FileMaker related, is when they pivot to prepay whenever they can, wherever they can, whatever compromise they have to make, they stop talking about cash flow problems forever. And they start talking about other kinds of business problems, which are much more valuable to spend time talking about.
Yeah. I just not to rain on Mark's parade, but if you look at, what Mark just said, right? So that's absolutely bar one of our business points too. Bob, three things that like are huge life lessons you've learned running the Alchemy Group.
First of all, you have to know that you're offering something to the customer that has equal value to whatever amount of money it's going to cost them. You have to go into every negotiation with the confidence that what you're going to provide for them is something that they really want and need. And not my first few years in business, I tended to approach most negotiations for a deal with a potential customer like I would have approached applying for a job, which immediately put me in the wrong place, in the wrong headspace. And you really have to walk in that door or get on that phone call or that Zoom call or whatever it is, knowing what you have to offer and with the confidence of your skills and your abilities and the people who work for you. That was one that it took me a long time to really learn it. Even though what I was offering had all of those things, I just didn't admit it to myself or go into things with the right headspace. Invest time and energy in internal systems and documentation and all of those things that are boring and don't make you any money, but will in the long run allow you to provide better customer service and be more accurate in your accounting for what work you've done for your client, et cetera, tracking time, all of those things. Whether it's something that you build yourself or which is mostly what we've done or working with a lot of outside cloud-based apps that give you those different aspects of your business. You got to be able to keep track of everything that's going on, especially when you start having more than one or two projects at a time as you expand from being maybe a one-person shop to a 5 or 10 or 15-person shop. That makes a big difference. And beyond that, I think have a plan looking forward because time passes quickly and you can be sitting there going along, this is all fine. It's all working the way I want it to. It's a well-oiled machine. Until one day you realize that well-oiled machine needs a little too much of my oil. And, I'm starting to think about, hey, what's next? What's down the line? Or is the industry changing? Or do we need to diversify or whatever? Have a plan before those things come up, before COVID hits or whatever,
It's Bob's birthday tomorrow, guys. I don't know if you know that. It's sort of, yeah, that's right. That's right.
So have a plan.
One of the things I want to just kind of point out, one of the things I think, Chris said it, Molly made reference to it in her thing. And to me, if you were to ask me what's the single, we work with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses. There's a decision maker, the chief cook and bottle washer, the guy who started the business in a tent or a garage or whatever. What's the single biggest problem that I see meeting with people in small businesses? And this goes for us as well, delegation. I think that the owner feeling like he's got to get his hands in there and do it all. I just have to take it over and do it myself. We've all seen that. So I think that's a reoccurring theme for all of us. At Angel City, for us, I'm just going to basically echo what a lot of you guys are, hire smart people. Barney Lawn once sat down with me and he said, be quick to fire and slow to hire. You know what I mean? Bring new people into your organization very slowly. They're going to disrupt your culture, and it can be a positive thing or a negative thing. If you get a cancer, get them out, early and often. That's a huge thing for us. The other aspect, know your value. Part of what Bob just said, we're on our heels, we're walking in, Mr. Please, can I have this job? I'll try to do a good job, as opposed to chest out walking in and going, I'm going to be your scout. Get the wagon train ready. We're going over these hills. We're going to get you to the promised land. Follow me. I know how to get you there. There's a mindset that changed for me a number of years ago, where I used to be, I can put a button on a screen wherever you want, Mr. Corporate Guy. And now I'm like, shut up, follow me. I'm gonna get you the success you're looking for. I don't say it exactly that way, but having that confidence, and once you experience things a certain way. The other thing, which I don't know if you guys feel this way at all or not, there's an awful lot of geeks who get good at building software, myself, back in the day, et cetera, but knowing what a good business is, knowing what a purchase order is, knowing what an invoicing system is, knowing how time tracking, being aware of these things. I can't tell you how many people we interview that at times have really strong skill sets, X, Y, and Z, and have never worked in this platform, or have never done have never worked in a business, or have experience working in inventory, or having touched a purchasing system, or things of those nature. So I think trying to be well-rounded in a wide variety of common business practices is a good thing to have as well. We're kind of rounding things out. We're going to open things up for questions in just a minute. I want to see, what's your Bob, what's your biggest, if you had one hope, and a couple of sentences here, let's try to make this quick and succinct. If you had one hope for the FileMaker platform that you'd like to see realized, is it better themes and styles, or what is that resounding thing that you go, this is where I'd like to see it head?
I would like to see FileMaker develop a vision that we can all get behind, and then implement it and grow as a platform to encompass a much bigger community.
Fair. Mr. Mark?
I've got two things. Make the platform more visible to the marketplace. I think, like you said, it'll rise all ships. And the other is monthly licensing by user, just like every other platform in the world. Something more flexible.
Yeah. Chris?
So I think we touched on a bunch of these, like, reduce the friction for new people to discover the platform, so the free tier, et cetera, and stuff like that. But just FileMaker is fundamentally a desktop product. And so it really needs to make that transition to become a cloud product. And there's a whole bunch of different ways that can unfold. And, that's a larger conversation that we wouldn't want to get into right here.
Ernest?
Yeah, took the words out of my mouth. I mean, I think cloud first. FileMaker needs to be a cloud first citizen. And I think that it needs to lean into, as you say, chest out on what it's really good at, and not be ashamed of thinking of itself as being old. It's modern, and there are lots of ways to do FileMaker in a modern way, and we're doing it. So say that.
Yeah, that chest out point is One of the points that I would make about that, I mean, again, the grisly days of FileMaker, which I think all of us remember, was going head to head with Access and calling out Access. We're better, we're faster, we're cheaper, total cost of ownership. I think that when you have Disney Plus going up against Netflix, it makes Netflix run harder and stronger and faster. I think competition is good for a company, and I think FileMaker was its best when it targeted, like, we're going after Access, and we're now far more out downloaded as a standalone product than Access was. I think FileMaker did a great job of that. So from that standpoint, what you're saying, Ernest, I think that kind of dovetails into that. Yeah, for me, if I were to summarize it, I would like to see excellence. You know, I think it's kind of an overarching statement, but I would like to see excellence in the marketing. I'd like to see an excellent product. I'd like to see an excellent licensing program like Chris was talking about and so forth. I'd like to see an excellent seeding program. I feel like those areas, any one of those areas can unlock other opportunities. And I think if they were to not focus on training or try to building new developers, I think if they build the product, the rest of it, I think if they build the marketing and the awareness, I think everything else does sort of fix itself. I think the marketplace will step in behind it and patch a lot of those things up for us. I'm going to have Lynn. I think there's just been, I've seen a ton of chats. I haven't had a chance to read any of them. Lynn, if you want to jump on here, unmute. If you've got any questions you feel that you want to throw to the group here, it'd be fantastic.
Well, a comment first, listening to all this. One of my favorite things about FileMaker is when a client or an end user comes to me and says, this is so easy, or it makes my job so much better. And that is the intangible that I work for, always hoping for. And, you know, it's not dependent on the platform, I guess, but FileMaker makes it pretty easy to do for us. So I really appreciate that. You're talking about marketing. So we've identified the targets of you know, the decision makers. We need to target IT people too. And Chris had some comments in the chat. I don't know when he had time, but he had comments about that we need to, I don't know if we can say renovate, but elevate the position of FileMaker among other applications in the eyes of IT to make it okay to support FileMaker.
Yeah, one of the things, you know, there's always a lot of talk about growing a platform, but also expanding and retaining a platform. I think that it's a really good idea to, on occasion, resell a platform to an existing customer, to give them the fuel. You know, the guy who's at the country club going, oh, we're using FileMaker. What the hell are you using that for? If you're sitting next to that CEO and going, oh my gosh, it does this, this, and this, and we can integrate, and it goes mobile, and we can tie it in with your website. If your customers fall in love with the platform just because of awareness issues and so forth, that helps. It helps retention. And I think if you get better at that, I think that also can be used in the same capacity for growth and new introductions.
Let me see.
And by the way, panel members, anything else you guys want to raise a flag about? I've been kind of championing various topics here, but anything that you guys want to jump to?
I'm going back over the chat, not so much.
I have one
Sure.
real quick, and I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on this. I've been thinking for a while that once they figure out what they want their marketing push to look like, I think it may be time for FileMaker to rebrand. You know, I think that if it had a new fresh face and name, it would go a long way towards making people take a second look at it. You know, even if they made it look like, oh, this is a new product that's really not, you know, I don't know. It seems to me like, well, even just the name FileMaker has always been kind of weird to begin with. We're all used to it, you know, but you know, it's kind of an odd little bird, and I don't know. It may be time for that. What do you guys think?
Well, you lose the heritage identification with a change.
You're not
You do it right.
benefiting. You're not benefiting on that nostalgia point that I made earlier. Which, if you guys ever get a chance, go to YouTube and look what Adobe did with Bob Ross. They did a Bob Ross mock-up that was hilarious and nostalgic. I think that's the kind of approach FileMaker could use to reach out to those people that used it 20 years ago. They're not leveraging that. So to Bob's point, if you're not building upon, hey, we've got a Volkswagen Beetle and we reissued it. If you're not leveraging that, then why are you sticking with a name that doesn't mean today what it probably meant back in the day? So there's some truth there. The other aspect, though, is, you know, you had StamPlay as this connector piece, and it got rebranded as Claris Connect. And I don't know that just rebranding a tool fixes it, right?
I also think I agree. I don't know if the brand holds it back as much as we think it does. I've had the same exact thoughts, word for word, that Bob just said. You know, just in terms of feeling like it's got this negative aspect of this sort of dated term that seems like, you know, the file cabinet folder kind of imagery just doesn't seem to jive with what people expect. But at the same time, you know, I've heard some of those discussions in various contexts with people from Claris asking those questions point blank, and there's a lot of thought about it there. You know, the cost of, you know, getting the appropriate name trademarked and branded in all the different countries. The same thing you said earlier about the widespread availability of languages. That comes with a cost and a bit of inertia in terms of being able to actually establish a brand across all those different locations. And so I sense that they could make themselves more visible with the same name. They tried some of that. We saw a little bit of that with Claris. I think they can do that as well. I would love a new name, but I think the product's the product, right? If the product is great and they get the name they've got out there, I still think it can make a big difference. And I don't think that they're ignoring that option. I think that they've rolled that option around with Dominique. They rolled it around with Brad. It comes up probably every year for them. And I think that it's a huge lift to get over that and establish a new name. And then you still have to have a marketing engine behind it, right? We've all talked about how they struggle on the marketing side. They've struggled for years on the marketing side. A new name isn't going to make them suddenly masters at marketing. They're still going to have to get that new name out there, and it's going to have zero cachet.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
it's former FileMaker, now this, you know, like.
We saw a workplace innovation platform, which didn't exist. They created it thinking it was a strategic advantage. They walked away from low code, no code, which was a $50 billion wave of new products coming to them. They chose to distance themselves from that, planted a flag with workplace innovation platform. Now it's not, I think they will take whatever they can get, but there, you go to the FileMaker website right now, low code is everywhere on the website. WIP is mentioned in a few strategic areas, but I think they're quietly letting that sort of shrivel and go away, and they're going to start embracing. I saw Brad on an interview from last year. He mentioned low code like 6 or 7 times during the interview. I didn't hear workplace innovation platform once. So I kind of think that's another sort of, we tried this rebrand. To Mark's point, we tried to come up with a new name or category, but there's a lot of inertia that's part of low code, no code. And I think they were finding that out and coming back to that now.
I saw some comments about, do we consider FileMaker low code?
What do you think, Chris?
I sure do, yeah. I mean, it's Lego type code, but
Digital
yes,
Legos.
it's absolutely low code. And, you know, to the extent that you can integrate things like Java or what have you, then yeah, you can do code if you want to. But yes, the drag and drop is, to me, by default, low code.
Okay.
All right, if we have any other questions, please feel free to unmute and ask the panel directly.
Robert's got his hand up.
Oh, I can't see. Robert.
Hey, sorry, everyone. I'll be putting my hand down. Yes, well, basically, alongside the branding part of things, when I read into what Claris brand is about, I see We're committed to empowering all people, regardless of ability or background, to create their solution and achieve success. And marketing issues aside, do we feel that Clarice is on brand? I sometimes feel like the intent is there, but not all the pieces are coming together. And I sometimes I'd like them to align more to that brand. But I don't know if I'm alone having that feeling, or if other have other perspective on this. So I'm just curious.
Ernest, I'm going to call you out. What do you think?
I think they're trying hard. I think it's a tough problem. I think there's some logic to riding the low-code bandwagon because, all the IT objections that we've all pointed out, you need a critical mass, you need a category that you can point to help define, what your strengths are. It's hard to be a category of one.
Yeah.
So workplace innovation platform was cool, but it's better if you have two. But if you're one, it's tough. So I think there's some challenges, and I think part of the thing that is unsaid here is that there's this feeling that FileMaker is not competitive in this low-code space because it's all web-based and SaaS-based and cloud-based and whatnot. I think I go back to this idea that we have to stop thinking like that, right? I mean, the nature of what low-code isn't just about building the kinds of apps that people associate with low-code. It's a very, very broad innovation space. And so long as they keep beating that drum and getting buy-in, I think we'll be fine.
Can I jump in on this? Because
sure,
there's a aspect to this that we never talk about, and that to me, low code is not a monolith. I think you have like your spreadsheet in the sky, which is arguably a low code thing. You have stuff that can, is optimized for maybe making, a mobile app or something like that. But it's not a one-trick pony, but it has a narrower focus. And then you have more complex, what are probably typically called enterprise grade low code, the Betty Blocks and
Mendix,
the world
yeah,
that can build a much more sophisticated application. And FileMaker, with its level of complexity and sophistication, firmly belongs in the realm of these higher end, but FileMaker would never claim to be enterprise class, but it belongs with that group of horses, if you will. And so it's not designed to build, TikTok or something like that. And it's not designed to be a spreadsheet in the sky. So there's a lot of nuance to the low code space is ballooned so much that it's fragmented into these sort of groups. And there's probably other pockets to that we could probably tease out if we wanted to. But I think we lose nuance in the conversation if we just talk about low code as this one big blob, and it's not. There are wrinkles to it.
Yeah, there's, to your point, Chris, I've been using that term spreadsheet in the sky, your Google Docs, Smartsheet, Airtable, basically it's table view, it's shareable, here's my credit card, or it's free. Mendix, OutSystems, Betty Blocks, all those higher end, more scalable are on the opposite end of that spectrum. You could even make the argument Salesforce and Lightning and some of those. And FileMaker does sit firmly kind of between those areas. We've got way more automation and complexity and control over things than those those smart sheets and alternatives like that, even though we may lack some of the scalability and enterprise class stuff at the other end of that. But I don't, favorable to FileMaker, I don't see a lot of other things that crowd in that middle space that give it way more complexity and capability than something like Airtable, but not at the cost of the infrastructure and the platform and stuff. Some of those other products, incredibly costly, $5,000 a month and really big buy-ins. And if you've got 1,200 users, they're worth doing. But if you've got 150 people and you're trying to keep them nimble, FileMaker does sit in that space pretty nicely.
Yeah. And I think the other aspect to this is that in the enterprise, which is largely a Microsoft domain, that Power Apps is going to be really tough to go up against because they're just already in there licensing wise. You know, it's like going up against
Access
back in the day.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's even worth bothering trying to compete in enterprise because the lift is so much bigger, trying to unseat the incumbent, if you will, as opposed to saying, okay, forget those guys, forget the, you know, Fortune 100. Let's look, you know, medium size and smaller and say that's where the most fruitful wins are and be much more targeted to that space than trying to, you know, knock off the AT&Ts or Toyotas of the world.
Right. Okay, guys, I hate to do this. This is a great group. I'm super glad having you guys on this panel, and thanks for all the time you dedicated to it. We're going to have to put an end to this right now. This will go up on YouTube. Again, special thanks, Mark, Bob, Chris, and Ernest. Love having you guys here. Love having anytime any one of you guys wants to come back and tell us a story or show us a solution or explode geekiness in your brains, we'd love to have you. But thanks for your time today. Thanks to Molly and Lynn also for earlier, and hope to see many of you guys next month at the next meeting. I think it is on the Friday, the 13th of May. So that's Lynn Allen. She's got some content getting ready for us, and look for that online. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Awesome job, Dave.
Thanks, everyone.